Goodness gracious, everyone, if it isn't episode 88 of the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast. My name is Dan, and it's that bit at the beginning of the show where I do the usual thing, that being, of course, the introduction of my good buddy, Phil. How is it going, Philip?
Not very good, thank you. I thought you were going to start off by doing some kind of bingo roll call and say 2 fat ladies, 88. Or in our case, 2 fat blokes.
2 fat blokes. Although you've lost, a reasonable amount of weight, Phil, these days. I remember it was a very strange experience for me when we travelled to Rapid Fire Wargaming to compete in a doubles game that we honestly weren't intending to continue shilling after last episode, but seeing as you introduced the topic, it felt appropriate. But yeah, I was legitimately shocked when you came to my front door after your missus dropped you off, and you came to the front door, and I was like, "Good God, Phil, you've become more slender."
Exactly. Got nothing better to do in lockdown than to do some exercises.
Absolutely. So in that respect, Phil, we would be the number 18, I suppose, in so much as you are the slender one and I the round.
I get to go first as opposed to 81.
That's correct.
First.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. We either 81 or 18, depending upon, the perspective that we, view ourselves through, I suppose. But, I feel like 18 is a more desirable number than 81, right? At least in terms of an age perspective.
Well, that's true. I mean, we have missed both of those episodes. They've been and gone.
They have been and gone. Those happened many years ago in the case of 18 and then 81 so recently. I can't even remember what we talked about in episode 81, Phil. I know I could check, but it seems like too much effort.
No, I'm sure it was one of those classic RAMBLE episodes.
Quite possibly. Space Marines or something of that sort. One of them 40k things. Who could say for certain? Other than, obviously, iTunes, where the listings are. Anyway, Phil, what are we going to be talking about today, my friend?
Oh, well, we are dialing into the noosphere. We are praising the Omnissiah, and we are reciting some canticles. And that is because we are talking about the new Adeptus Mechanicus Codex.
I heard they is well good, Phil. Are they well good?
There's definitely some fun bits in there. They seem pretty good so far. They're not too shabby.
I was hoping you would go with something like, well, you're just going to have to keep listening to find out, or something to that effect. But obviously we've done it now, so
no,
we'll just have to deal with that as it is.
There could be some terrible spoilers later on about how awful they are. You'll just have to listen to find out whether they really are good or bad.
There you go. You recovered beautifully, Phil. That is why we get 5-star reviews like this 5-star review.
Well, howdy, partner. These boys keep joshing us about with all their chitter-chatter about little plastic figurines. They've asked me to do this jingle for them. I don't know what they're talking about half the time. But anyway, now it's time for that 5-star review. Thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the show. And let's all pray that it doesn't go on as long as it did last week. Yeehaw!
I have to admit, Phil, though obviously, that bit that occurs in between us was all lovely as always. That was probably one of the worst 5-star review segues I've done in a little while. I just essentially said 5-star review followed by 5-star review. It was pretty poor form.
I expect nothing less.
Oh, really? You've lowered your expectations to that extent?
I think so.
All the pressure's on me, though, Phil. I got to come up with some sort of way of moving this along. You just kind of say stuff. I'd rather be in your position.
Well, you could be, but you're not.
No, because arrogance won't let me.
I'm the one and you're the 8. I get to go first.
There you go. So, Phil, this week's 5-star review comes from where, Phil?
Is it the Apple Podcasts of Great Britain?
It is, again, the Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. Not that we obviously don't have reviews from other locations, but for whatever reason, we got a healthy chunk of reviews from the Great Britons. We do well, Phil, in the Britons. That's a thing I say now, as long as also, as well as words, that, this is a 5-star review, a prerequisite of appearing in the 5-star review segment. And if you would like to leave a 5-star review like this as of yet unannounced individual, please do so, because that'll give us something to brag about. I was actually looking at, Phil, other kind of rival podcasts, other podcasters And I was shocked by the efficiency of this segment, in so much as we do have a lot of reviews on our podcast versus the competition. If only they'd thought of this, it would have all worked out for them.
Well, let's hope they're not listening and going to steal this great idea. I would also say, if you are on Spotify or some other podcast app that doesn't have a review feature, a few people have started to direct message us on Instagram about it, because we talked about it in a previous episode. You could do that, but we would much rather you go onto our Facebook page and leave us a review there where it is official and we can actually read it out, because I keep trying to get Dan to read out the ones that he's just messaged us and he won't do it. So
no, unfortunately, although obviously those messages are incredibly heartwarming and appreciated, they are of no numerical value to our overall performance, therefore worthless to me.
You're a stickler for the rules.
Exactly. It's not fair to those that have made iTunes accounts specifically with the express purpose of leaving 5-star reviews.
Yeah. So if you're not on iTunes and you're not on Facebook, then I don't think you can take part in this segment.
No, that's not true, Phil. That's not true. They can leave 5-star reviews on other locations where 5-star reviews can be led. Podbean, Stitcher, maybe. There's options out there. I swear it.
Okay.
Are you genuinely putting me on the spot to basically make me now have to agree to start reading out just, the comments ones?
Oh no, I'm sort of happy with the way we do it. I just think we need to inform.
Then why
people.
did you create this situation, Phil? Why did you do this in front of everyone? Why did you make me into the bad guy?
Because I don't want to have to keep telling people on Instagram personally, like, yeah, thanks very much, but we can't read it out because of Dan. So I'll just put it out here now for all to hear.
As if you don't have a say in this, Phil. Like, if you made a strong argument.
Because I am the 1 and you're the 8, but the 8 is the higher, more powerful number. The 1 gets bullied around by the 8. Everyone knows.
Exactly. I'll bash you around with my big fat belly.
I thought you were going to say your big fat 8.
Well, exactly. My big fat 8. I give you what for. Anyway, on the topic of giving what for, we have a 5-star review now from NAF7 UK. And this 5-star review comes via Apple Podcasts of Great Britain, as we've said already. And this is an excellent podcast, highly recommended, 5 stars. A fantastic podcast. Decided to give audiobooks a break and find a podcast to listen to. I'm so glad I did, as these fellas have great banter, are very knowledgeable, Phil, about the hobby, but ultimately honest and are not afraid to say it how it is, without preaching or being elitist about certain hobby aspects. I mean, come on now. I was about to call you Hill rather than Phil. Phil's rather elitist, aren't you, Hill?
100%. It's like, I collect Krieg. I love my Forge World. If there's nothing more elitist than Krieg players and Forge World, I don't know what is.
And you play in that event for the Secret Society of the Slippery Fingers.
Yes, for no retreaters. Yes.
Yes.
Well, maybe not this year. I've fallen from grace. So.
Well, you're still on their special guest list. It could happen yet. Maybe. You are the pinnacle.
I've got to get those slippery fingers in there to make it happen.
Well, exactly, mate. Exactly. That's it. Maybe you just didn't quite satisfy with those last time. That's you got to learn some new techniques.
Yeah.
Anyway, 5 stars. But my God, the cowboy part is annoying. And I'm still not sure what happened to Joe, as he's not longer on the show, it seems. No longer on the show, it seems. So clearly this individual is not a fond fan of the rare instances where we use the cowboy segue for our 5-star review. You'll notice, by the way, obviously, that I chose to use the cowboy segment for this, the cowboy intro for this segment, specifically because he said he didn't like it. But yeah, Joe isn't on.
A bit harsh.
Like, he clearly invited that opportunity, didn't he? It's not like, if someone says they don't like something, it's only polite that I, play it.
If you say so. I think we should do our own. I think we can make up some good ones.
Well, we can't now, Phil. It's already happened. I know, obviously, at this moment in time where we're recording, it hasn't happened, but for the listeners, it's already occurred.
But maybe next week we'll do our own. We'll homebrew it.
All of these beautiful jingles are homebrewed. I just need him to come up with some new ones. He's been very, very useless lately. So maybe that is the opportunity.
Maybe why we should do our own.
All right. Oh, they are already our own, Phil. You know, I don't
Well,
want you to
yes,
feel like you don't
yeah.
have ownership of these,
No, I
you
know.
know, already. This is all part of the makeup of the Lookout Sir 40k podcast. But yeah, Joe's not on the show anymore. He's gone off to make YouTube videos with someone else that he likes more than us. Right, Phil?
I know. We're very, very sad that that's the case. He's abandoned us.
We're not bitter about it at all.
I mean, it's all good. We're still all friends. It's all
No,
it's
we
all
are,
happy.
really.
Honest it is.
I saw him on the weekend. I rubbed his face in a socially distancing way.
Brilliant.
I rubbed nothing but hand sanitizer over myself, and then I applied it to his skin.
If Joe was to have a number, what would it be?
I don't know.
Is he more of a 10?
I know. I'm so confused. I'm trying to think of the context that we've established with bingo numbers from the outset, and I've got nothing. Phil. Why don't you just thank Nafe7 UK for the 5-star review, and we can just move on from this whole fiasco.
Thank you very much for your review, the kind-hearted, warm words. Even if you're not a fan of, our not transitional noises, because they're the classic, but the 5-star review cowboy noises, they can be a bit jarring and loud at times. So understandable. We will do better. We will make some. I'll make one and make Dan play it for you next week, just from me to you as a special gift.
I like the fact that clearly, Nave7 UK isn't alone in his disliking of some of these jingles here, Phil. I feel like there's some sort of conspiracy here, as if you've set this up.
I mean, he might be a friend of mine from down the road. I just casually mentioned it. No, I think the thing was, it was when we did the last end of the show quiz. We did a classic traditional noise for the quiz intro that I had made a long time ago, and I was like, I quite like those sort of ones that use the intro music.
I like it when we just change it up entirely. The intro music is the intro music. I don't want it everywhere. It's also the outro music, to be fair. I often wonder whether we need a different outro tune to the intro tune.
No, it's keep it the same, consistent.
See, the listeners now are getting an insight into the creative process of how do I get things past Phil.
Exactly. Who is the 1 and who is the 8 in this conversation?
Exactly. The reality is that it's much more of a one-way street.
Not an 8-way street.
No, unfortunately not. That would just loop round on itself. Anyway, there we go. That was us introducing episode 88. We hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much for the 5-star review. Nave7 UK, hugely appreciated. But we're going to move on now with a transitional noise. Woo! It's exciting, Phil. It's time that we go through the process of reviewing. That's right. Must have been a little bit of a glitch in the matrix there, some kind of technological failing, because we are reviewing now the book known as Codex Adeptus Mechanicus. Ooh, exciting, right, Phil?
All hail the Omnissiah.
Exactly. Wasn't it Mechanicum once upon a time? When did it change to Mechanicus? How did that all happen?
Do you know what? I don't know, but I believe Horus Heresy, it was Adeptus Mechanicum, and then at some point it became Adeptus Mechanicus. But then I think that's because I don't know if that was the merger of Mechanicum and Scutari. I don't know. Maybe
it was something to do with like the heresy, because like a portion of the Mechanicum sided with Horus, right? So it's logical that what remained maybe got a new name, thus forming a meaningful division.
Like what I said last week, isn't it good if we did some fact checks on these things before we talked about it?
Exactly. That's why everyone loves the Lookout Sir Warhammer 40,000 podcast, because they come here for our quality lore and or accurate,
for those idle speculations that we don't know if it's correct or not, but we just say it with enough authority to believe that it is.
That is how I have gotten through life, my friend. Just deliver it with gusto.
Confidence.
Exactly. Confidence is everything when it comes to reviewing small toy soldiers and the books that the rules for which are held within.
It will please our listeners to know that we've actually read this book in advance this time. We've actually done some research. We sat down, we spent the last evening going through it all, so we don't need to just read through it with you. listeners, we can actually try and summarize these things and see how well we can remember what we learned yesterday.
Well, that is true. In an attempt to make this a little less me and Phil alternate reading stuff and then commenting on that, we have already forged some opinions. Truth be told, though, we didn't really read all the stratagems, did we? We mostly focused on, Forge Worlds, other weird rules, trying to work out. There's a lot, isn't there? Like, I know we say this often. There is a lot to a modern 40k codex. It's vast. It's unbelievable.
I would say, though, it isn't as complicated as people are making it out to be, but it's still not an easy read. But
do you feel
once
like
you get through it, the cogs whir, so to speak, and click into place, and you go, I get it now. Okay.
Do you feel like that is because you're too far gone, Phil? You're too indoctrinated into the 40k world.
I'm half man and I'm half machine now. I'm too far gone.
Not just the machine comparison, but just from the fact that you're so embroiled in 40k related fun that this stuff doesn't seem complicated to you when really it actually is.
Well, I think there is a level of complexity to it, and I think having looked at other codexes like the Drakari, which is I think not as equally complex, but the three sub-factions, the cabals and stuff that make it up, and then you've got your upgrades to certain units, so it feels like we've gone through some of those mechanics before, so when you get to this one you're like, okay, I sort of understand more bits to it now. And it's built upon those previous codexes. Like you can pay points to upgrade characters in the same way that you can upgrade a captain to a chapter master, for example, and stuff like that. But there is complexity to it, and I think there is, and it's easy for us to just read it. Like if you were playing this and you want to play it to a really good standard, let's say you want to go to a tournament, then I think it is complicated, and there is a lot to remember and think about. Lots of things have abilities. It isn't just things like your doctrines that you need to remember. So I think there is a lot more of a complexity that we can kind of wash over as we pass judgment on this codex.
Yeah, I think the thing that's always interesting about the modern game design of Warhammer 40,000 is all the different sources of interactions and how they have effectively looked to layer complexity into the game by adding lots of kind of specific scenarios based on specific unit options that create those synergies. And obviously that's been the way it's been for a very long time, but, obviously exemplified throughout 8th edition, but it feels very much in 9th edition. There's a lot of really strange instances of things occurring at certain points and, a degree of weirdness in terms of what you need to remember and how those things activate. And we'll get into all of that as we go through it. But yeah, it's a lot of different things all built around the same ideology, but then at the same time not. It's just it's odd. It is odd modern 40k in that sense. I think with Marines it's easy to kind of navigate to an extent because a lot of those foundations were laid down in the 2019 codexes and subsequent supplements, whereas when we start introducing ideas for the Necrons, the Mechanicus, the Drakari, the Death Guard, all this stuff kind of layers in ways that is interesting, is what I can say. But anyway, we should probably just get on and talk about it, Phil. I mean, not that we normally do summaries at the start, because normally we haven't read these things before. But going into this, it might be worth just saying how you're feeling about it in the run-up to this. Are you much of a AdMech fan? I mean, you've bought the book. Surely you have aspirations of becoming an AdMech player at some point.
Well, I bought the book purely for my love of this podcast. However, I've always had a soft spot for Adeptus Mechanicus. I've always loved the models. I've always wanted to get into it on some level. So it's always in the back burner. And I do have knights as well. I've always liked the idea of doing a knight Mechanicus sort of style army at some point. So I'm kind of glad I got it. It's got some fantastic artwork on it. The front cover, phenomenal. Near the back, some old John Blanche artwork, phenomenal. Some new artwork in there, also phenomenal.
Is that John Blanche artwork old, or is that new John Blanche work?
There's very little new stuff that he does. But
really? There must be some new stuff. He still works for him.
Yes, but he's semi-retired, so a lot of the stuff that he does do, I believe, is just still concept artwork,
Oh, okay.
as opposed to those kind of slightly more finished pieces.
Gotcha. Well, from my side of things, I have a small contingency of Adeptus Mechanicus. They've always been a contingency of my Imperial Knight collection. So I have roughly 30 Skitarii Vanguard, one Tech Priest Engine Seer, and one Tech Priest Dominus, and an Onager June Crawler with a Eradicator Beamer. What's the long the lassie cannon thing?
The neutron laser.
The neutron laser. No one knows what a neutron laser is.
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
Unless you're anyone.
Unless you're anyone. No, I was doing a bit. I know it's a neutron laser. Anyway, yeah, so the neutron laser, because that's what I put on it.
The iconic loadout.
Well, I don't know if it's iconic necessarily. I just sort of liked it at the time. I thought it looked good. And, actually, I've got to be completely honest. Joe painted it for me. So I have to assume that was a good option once upon a time, because that was what was stuck on it. And I had no options to use anything else. So maybe in 8th edition, that was the go-to weapon. Anyway. But yeah, so I have a small Skitarii collection. I did just buy Skitarii Commander Man. Marshall, thank you. Old Marshall, glorious Marshall. Marshall Skitarii, got that, so need to add that to collection. I keep eyeing up different aspects of the Skitarii and or Cult Mechanicus and thinking, ooh, maybe. But the amount of stuff I need to add to the collection to make a 2,000 point army, I'll just say it, it's really pricey to do AdMech. Like, when you start looking at it, these are pricey.
Yeah, I think it's probably not as expensive as Genestealer Cult. I think that's considered the most expensive to collect. Obviously, that's not including things like Krieg, maybe. But you're
flexing there, Phil.
Well, no,
dusting off your shoulders.
No,
that's right.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if it's actually comparable to a Forge World army. So
yeah, I would say so.
But I think AdMech a bit cheaper, but still pretty expensive. It's but at the same time, most of the models are actually really lovely. Like, they're really well sculpted. There's a couple of misses in my opinion, which I'm sure we'll cover when we just flip through the book and talk about the data sheets. But overall, it's a really good range.
What I will say about the range is I personally like miniatures that have practical kind of use on the tabletop. I like gaming pieces. I find as an Elder player, it's always been very difficult. It's one of the reasons why I didn't really stick with Drukhari, is because Drukhari was so ornate in their construction. It was actually quite difficult to keep the things together. And I do think the AdMech suffer with a bit of that. I think when you've got the Vanguard, you've got the Onager, you've got the transports, you've got the robots, all this stuff is great. But as soon as you start looking at things like the big bat-winged fly guys, you start going, ooh, yeah, that's going to be difficult to transport, and that's going to be difficult to keep in one piece. So I assume a lot of people are magnetizing those guys in some way, shape, or form, if using it as gaming pieces, because they do look fragile.
Or maybe they just don't have clumsy butterfingers.
It's not me I have to worry about, mate. It's every time I play a game against Richie. Like letting a tornado loose on the tabletop. Yeah, exactly. He's like, oh, can I just move this miniature for you? Bam! It just literally, anything he touches turns to rubble. He always loves it when I shout him out on the podcast like this, by the way. He definitely never makes a thing out of it on our various little chat groups.
Grumble, grumble.
Grumble, 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 grumble. Rightly so, to be fair. I definitely threw some shade in that exchange. In that one-way exchange. That's the genius of it. But I know he likes us talking about him, really. He likes to be heard. By the way, Phil, when we get around to doing the Sisters version of this, we should really get him on, right? Considering that he actually does play Sisters.
I guess.
There we go. I've done it for you, Richie. I said it on the pod. Now Phil can't deny you behind the scenes. I got you back. Anyway, let's talk about Mechanicus. So if you're wanting to field a Mechanicus force, first of all, you might refer to this section of the book called The Rules, within which you'll see detachment abilities, which are the sort of things you would expect an army to come with, such as your troops get OBSEC. Ooh, exciting. I've never heard of that before. You also get a little bit of spiel about Forge World dogmas, which are essentially the things your Forge World gets, like a chapter tactic, like a Craftworld attribute, like a Imperial Guard regimental doctrine.
Correct. Yeah.
Hey, I'm on point today. And then you also get this thing called Knight of the Cog, which essentially states that if you take an auxiliary,
Super heavy auxiliary detachment.
Thank you. Super heavy auxiliary detachment. You do not lose access to your canticles.
Yeah, it's done it in a very roundabout way. Basically, if you take a Questa Mechanicus super heavy auxiliary, your army gains the Knight of the Cog ability. And the Knight of the Cog ability basically says, even though it's not a Forge World, it doesn't break the Canticles ability, which requires your whole army to have the same Forge World, or the detachment does.
Question, Phil. We saw in leaked versions of Chapter Approved that they've changed the way that auxiliary heavy support, super heavy auxiliary detachments work, in so much if they're from the same faction, they don't cost as much now, sort of incentivizing people to put Lord of Wars back on the table. One, do we even think that's true? And two, if it is, would it apply to this, you think?
I mean, who knows if it's actually true or not. I've only seen it mentioned once, and you would have thought if it was a thing, it would have been talked about a bit more. But I think one of the criticisms of Lord of Wars is, yes, so for example, Guard went down in price, but it's the CP tax is why people don't take it. Also, things like the the obscuring terrain affecting them, and the terrain density on the table also affecting these bigger units. So there's lots of these downsides. Now, I'm just trying to remember what the rule said. I think it had to be from the same faction, not the same... Yeah,
if you had to have a keyword, a faction keyword that wasn't
a faction keyword that wasn't the super one. So I guess in theory this probably wouldn't work. I'm going to say off the top of my head, but who knows?
Who knows? We'll find out next week when we talk about Chapter Approved, I imagine, when we have that actual literature in our hands. I hear it's a bit disappointing. Spoilers. Although good if you like secondaries, I guess, and very little else. There you go. Right, yeah, anyway, so detachment abilities, that's how that works. So, yeah, they talk about Forge World dogmas, and there are a bunch of those, and each of them basically give you access to a warlord trait, a unique stratagem, and a unique relic, which is always super cool. First of these, I feel like, Phil, considering we had the benefit of going through this before, do we want to call out the ones we think are the bestest from the outset and then kind of go to the ones we think are the worstest? Or do we want to do it the other way around? How do you want to do it?
Let's talk about the ones we like. I mean, I don't think there's any bad ones. I think there's some that are just... I don't know, maybe don't appeal to our play style. There's some that just seem objectively good or like easy to play. This seems really cool. It's got some unique strategies and synergies. And then there's others that are just okay. And obviously there's like your famous Forge Worlds, which are named. You also have an ability to make kind of a custom Forge World, which I think are called like, was it not Lost Forge Worlds, but Distant Worlds they're called. With those, you get basically a primary ability, which you have to take, and then you get, I think, 3 secondary abilities, but you get to pick one of them, one of the 3. So you get an option of customizing them. And I like that fact because there's obviously some synergized elements to them. It's not just pick and choose of, a big long list of things. So I think they can balance how these abilities actually work with each other. So I think that's really good. And some of them are really good. And obviously you've got one that is a bit like Inheritors of the Primarch. It's called Parent Protocols, which basically says you can take the ability of a named or dogma of a named Forge World and things like abilities, character abilities and relics and stuff like warlord traits. You just replace the name of the Forge World to whatever your Forge World is called. Yeah. But in doing so, I don't believe you get access to you get access to the warlord trait, but if I remember rightly, you don't get access to the relic or the stratagem.
No, you get access to the warlord trait and the ability, but you can't access the stratagem or any of their.
Or
sorry, you can't access. You can access the stratagem. You can access the warlord trait. You don't get access to the relic, nor do you get access to any of their special characters. But considering there's only one named character in this entire book, that only really means Mars. But what I will say with AdMech is that AdMech aren't like Space Marines or even Chaos Space Marines, in so much as, with the exception of Mars, no one really knows what the color scheme is for anything. And to be honest with you, most of the color schemes of the Forge Worlds that aren't Mars are mostly red as well, if you go by what's in this book. So realistically, this is one of those armies that no one is ever going to care what color scheme it is. You just tell them what it is. They don't have the same history, the same baggage, the same in-world kind of gravitas as Space Marines do. So yeah, it's one of the weird advantages of playing armies that aren't Space Marines. You just paint them any old color and no one cares. But yet you play a blue Space Marine as a Blood Angel, hell to pay. It's weird. It's a weird how it works, right, Phil?
Indeed, yeah.
But anyway, on the topic of the one with the special character, and easily, I think it's fair to assert, unless you are exploring some very specific builds around some very specific gimmicks, Mars are always going to be your go-to. Much like how, the Black Heart were in Drakari as pretty much the go-to of the Cabals, Mars is the go-to Forge World for the Adeptus Mechanicus. And that's due to two reasons. Reason number one is they are able to give their Scutari units canticles, which may not seem like much until you actually get into that, and we will get into that later. But the synergies of being able to use canticles with these new Scutari, what are they called now, Phil?
Are you talking about like the birds, like the Patraxi or something?
No, the Scutari ability that's like canticles, but it's not canticles.
I'm
now flicking to the page.
Imperative?
Doctorin Imperatives. That's the word. Doctorin Imperatives, which is basically the Scutari version of canticles. But typically a Scutari unit can't access those canticles unless, of course, it's Mars. So the synergy between those two abilities is super strong. And also you can reroll one hit roll when resolving that unit's attack, which again is super useful. So you got baked in rerolls on units, and you get canticles, and you get your Scutari Doctrine stuff, which is, pretty strong, right, Phil?
Yeah. So I don't know if we've explained it, but canticles only work on Mechanicus units.
Yeah, Cult Mechanicus.
Cult Mechanicus, which tends to be all your tech priests, your Catphron breaches destroyers, your Castellan robots, servitors, although servitors don't actually get canticles of Yom, so that's the exception. The basic servitors, that is, and the electro priests. That is basically all that is Mechanicus. It's not a lot. Everything else is Scutari, and they get the Doctrina Imperatives. Basically, they both act very similar. Effectively, at the beginning of your turn, you get to pick one. You can't pick one that you've already picked, and you go through the list. And I believe canticles, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yes.
And then Doctrina Imperatives is 1, 2, 3, 4. And obviously it's 5 turns, so there's one, I presume you miss out, or you get to repeat at the end.
No, you just miss out.
You just miss out. Okay. And you need a certain character on the table with Doctrine Imperatives at the start of your battle round to be able to select them. I think canticles, you can just do that regardless.
Canticles are always happening, whereas the Doctrina Imperatives are only accessible when you have characters. All of the AdMech characters in the HQ section anyway have the ability to activate those imperatives. So or doctrines words, they can do that stuff. So as long as you don't lose your characters, you're going to be able to access it, but it does create an interesting dynamic.
And the imperatives, Doctrine Imperatives, have a buff and a debuff. So there's always, they're called optimization and deprecation. So there's always a positive and always a negative. So for example, you can increase your ballistic skill by 1, but your weapon skill is also decreased by 1. And likewise, there's one that reverses that. There's one that gives you a plus to your save, but then your move characteristic was reduced by 3. And there's one that increases your move by 3 and decreases your save. So interesting stuff, and very kind of key about when you're going to be actually using that on the table, or when you don't want to be using them, for example. I think the canticles tend to just always be a good bonus. It's just a matter of when you want to actually activate them. So, for example, one of them gives you the benefit of light cover. That's perfect for the first battle round, and it's the battle round, not your turn. So even if you're going second, you can activate it, which is always a plus.
I mean, what I suppose we've inadvertently done here, Phil, is illustrate to the listeners the absurd layout of these books, really. Because in my opinion, now that we're delivering the information to you, the listener, it's logical, right, that you should probably have started with the canticles and the doctrines, because the imperative. I cannot get that right in my head today.
Doctrina imperatives.
Doctrina imperatives. Thank you. It's that order. Anyway, the point is you should start with that, right? Because that's an important thing to understand from the outset.
Yeah.
Because it is so core to the army.
You to even understand the Forge World and some of the characters, you need to understand how this mechanic works first, even though it's literally pretty much at the back just before the data sheets. The layout of the book is a bit messy. We're trying to do it in chronological order, but it doesn't really make sense that way. Crusade is slapped right bang in the middle of all your match play rules. Yeah, that should just be at the back or to one side. Where they've put it just makes no sense.
That's the book layouts are a bit painful, unfortunately. But Phil, just to kind of completely do it justice, though, right? I mean, from the canticle perspective, what is different about that from the old edition? Do you even know, or do I need to say?
If I remember rightly, the old one you got to roll. So you could always get the same one. I think Cool allowed you to roll 2 dice and pick. And I think there might have even been an ability that made you go +1, -1 as well. So you almost always guaranteed the canticles that you wanted. Now, again, as I said, you got to pick one, and you can't pick one that you've already picked. There are abilities and characters like Belisarius Cool, though, that allow you to activate one that you've already activated for you and a model within 6 inches, if I remember rightly.
Well, that is in fact the Mars warlord trait that you just referenced there. But yeah,
yes, but it is also an ability he has, if that's not to make things extra confusing, because he gets a different warlord trait.
It's true. Belisarius Cool does not have the Mars warlord trait, which is weird.
Yes.
But you were mostly right. You had the option to pick or the option to roll. If you picked it, you couldn't pick it again, but you could find yourself with it again via a roll. You could either roll it or pick it. And if you were Mars, you got to roll like 2 dice. And if you were Belisarius Cool, he increased or decreased the number depending upon your preference. But so that's a good change. The actual canticles have changed themselves as well. They're not the same as they used to be. So as Phil already said, one of them is you get light cover. One of them is that you add 1 to the strength characteristics of melee attacks. One of them is each time combat attrition tests are taken for this unit, ignore all modifiers. So they're like Krieg, Phil.
Yay. Yes.
There you go. And that each time a mortal wound is done to the unit, and that is the same, by the way, as this is Incantation of the Iron Soul. So that is both ignoring combat attrition and shrugging off mortal wounds on a 5-up. Unless, of course, you could already shrug off mortal wounds with a 5-up, in which case you now do it on a 4-up, because there's a doctrine that allows you to already do that natively. So one of those guys, one of the Forge Worlds already has that baked in. You've got one where you can reroll 1 hit, 1 wound roll, 1 damage roll for a unit, which is really cool. And then you've got one which is essentially each time an advanced roll or charge roll is made for this unit, roll 1 additional d6 and discard the lowest result.
Super cool.
Which is very handy. I mean, definitely good for charges, right? Because the idea that you can basically roll 3d6 and discard your lowest dice is...
Yeah. It goes really well with that combo we were talking about yesterday and we were talking about today with your Castellan robots, for sure.
Well, exactly. We'll get on to that in a bit. What's interesting about the way they've written that, by the way, though, is advanced roll gets a capital A for the advance, or charge roll. It's all just lowercase. Weird little inconsistency there. But
yeah, I've noticed it in the data sheets as well. There's some bits where stats, like your movement stat, for example, is in bold for no reason, and it's inconsistent. And it obviously shouldn't be that way, but it just is. And I mean, I am a designer, so I do spot these things, but it strikes me odd that this went past proofreaders and no one just happened to notice that.
Well, I feel like you and I don't necessarily appreciate the churn that these guys probably have to deal with.
Well, that, and I think that obviously this probably all got put together during lockdown when people were working from home and stuff. So there's plenty of exceptional reasons why those little mistakes and errors pop in, but they do exist and they are noticeable.
Well, exactly. We're passionate fanboys who do a podcast completely at our own expense. So, we'll look at these things and critique it. But I imagine if I was doing this as my job day in, day out, it would get to a point where I'd be like,
oh, whatever. Send it to print.
That's close enough. Who cares if
we'll fix it in post.
We'll chuck out a errata. That'll sort it. And then, the last one is Litany of the Electromancer, which is while this canticle is active, each time a melee attack is made against a unit, subtract 1 from the attack's hit roll. So basically, canticle-wise, there's some good stuff. Doctrine imperatives, good lord, I always want to say imperiatus. Imperatives essentially have good points and bad points. Phil has touched upon these mostly already, but essentially whatever you add in one place, you take away from another. So you can have an improved save, but you'll lose your movement, or you'll have improved movement and you'll lose 1 to your save, or you'll have better shooting, but then you'll be worse at fighting. Or is there a one where you're better at fighting and lose shooting? Yes, there is. And that pretty much summarizes all of it, really. Yeah.
So now we go back to Mars, and you think
correct
those canticles that are specifically for your Adeptus Mechanicus units, where you can add 1 to your strength characteristic, reroll 1 hit roll, wound roll, and damage roll, suddenly can apply to all your Skitarii units, which will probably make up 70% of your army. So that is huge, just off the bat. Just like as a freebie for your dogma, that is great.
Yeah,
and it
drastically changes the army.
Yeah,
drastically changes it.
Completely unlocks a load of synergies that just isn't available to any of the others, which is very interesting. And I think that will take a while for people to sort of work out how best to utilize that, because now, there's just so many more units that can apply to.
What is interesting to me now, Phil, just to sort of double, triple check this, can I mix detachments? So can I have a Mars detachment and another detachment and still gain canticles? Or do I have to be the same universally to access canticles?
I believe you do it on a detachment by detachment basis. So you can have your Skitarii and Mechanicus all mixed in one detachment, let's say Mars, but then you can have another detachment that is, say, Riser, and each one will get its own canticle benefit, I believe. So I'm
just reading the Forge World Dogmas, all Adeptus Mechanicus units. It must be in the canticles section. Hang on 2 seconds. This is something we didn't actually think to check.
Yeah, so for Doctrine Imperatives and Canticles of the Omnissiah, your whole army needs to have Adeptus Mechanicus keyword, excluding Agents of the Imperium, unaligned, a Knight of the Cog. And obviously that Knight of the Cog ability is your extra Knights detachment that you can bring along, which is Questor Mechanicus, or Mechanicum. Mechanicus, I think, which is how, which basically just excludes them from that ability. If you were to take the super heavy detachment that isn't the auxiliary one, that would be exempt. Or if you take 2 knight detachments or two super heavy auxiliaries, basically you can get 1 knight and you don't break your canticles or your Doctrine Imperatives. If you take more than that, unless they're the small ones, you basically can't do it without losing your ability.
Gotcha. So essentially you can have a Mars detachment partnered with another detachment and you would still be gaining all these abilities.
Yeah.
Oh, so even if you're exploring certain types of shenanigans builds with certain things, you can still have the backbone of your army being made up of Mars Scutari units, and then add in as you please. Obviously, at the cost of CP. It's interesting, actually, because that opens up a lot more potential as well for the way this army can play, because there is a lot of gimmicks in the other Forge worlds that actually now is quite exciting.
Mostly they all do one thing really well. So, for example, one's super durable, one's got loads of movement, sort of shenanigan options that they can redeploys and stuff. And things like that. One of the custom ones is super good for vehicles because it allows you to regenerate wounds, gives you, I think, like a feel no pain for your wounds as well, potentially, if you take the secondaries, which you don't really get in any of the named Forge worlds. So, yeah, I think if you want to mix and match stuff, you might go, well, I'll take these particular units as this. I mean, that's always the way. Everyone says the super most competitive way is to split your army up into multiple detachments, even though it's a bit of a faff. But yeah, there doesn't seem to be any real downside to doing that beyond having to take an extra detachment.
Yeah, it's just like, though, for example, if you wanted to take an Ultramarines army and you wanted to gain access to their super doctrine where they can count as remaining stationary even after they've moved, everything has to be an Ultramarine. Everything, except for an Imperial and Agent. Whereas this is unique in so much as you are gaining, or you gain it regardless of what your army is made up of. Marines are interesting because in Marines, you could take a Dark Angels detachment alongside an Imperial Fist detachment, and you would still get the doctrines. You just wouldn't get the super doctrines. So that's an interesting world of potential there. Anyway, Warlord traits for Mars is what Phil has already said. Basically, you get to pick a canticle for your Warlord and a Mars core unit within 6 of it. So essentially, you might be going, I fancy having light cover this turn for me and this unit of, core whatever. I'll do that. And then you do that. And there it is. So that's how that Warlord trait works. And it is in every command phase. So that isn't a once per game thing. And what's interesting about that, in terms of how Canticles works, is you trigger a Canticle at the start of your battle round. But if you're going second, you can trigger a defensive Canticle for the firepower that's coming in at the start of your first turn. And then you can pivot into a more offensive one in your command phase, which
for
is actually
your Warlord plus 1 extra unit. Yeah.
For your Warlord plus 1 extra unit. And then what becomes interesting again is if you're going second, the next battle round comes around, and you go, cool, I'll pivot back into a defensive one. So, it's got potential as a Warlord trait. I actually quite like it. I think there are better, but it's not bad.
I think it's pretty strong. I don't know if there's stratagems that also allow you to do it, but if there's not, then this is worth considering almost just for that, basically, because it gives you that extra flexibility.
Yeah, and even if there are stratagems that let you do it, I'm a big fan of investing in something that saves me CP.
Well, exactly.
CP is important in that sense.
Yeah.
What's the relic, Phil? Some sort of big red axe.
Yeah, the red axe is a cool close combat weapon. It swaps out your Omnissiah Omnissian axe. So it gives you +2 strength, which I believe is what you already get anyway. -5 AP, which I believe is instead of, I don't remember, is it -2 or -3?
It's -2.
-1, in fact.
Oh, even better.
You text. Let's double check they're all the same.
Double check.
Oh, actually, weirdly, the staffs are the axes. Oh no, right, one's a staff. Sorry, yeah, the axe is +2 -2 damage. This becomes +2 -5 2 damage. But also, each time the bearer fights, you gain 3 additional attacks. Most of them, for example, your Tech Priest Dominus, for example, has 3 attacks, so that doubles it to 6. Tech Priest Engineer has 2, so that takes it up to 5. Yeah, it's not bad. I quite like it. You can make some interesting kind of close combat builds with a lot of these armies, which I think is pretty good.
Oh, totally agree, mate. Totally agree. I mean, the fact that you are increasing your attacks to 6 if you're taking the Dominus, and the fact that there's going to be -5 2 damage, There's going to be a lot of, marine themed things that won't much appreciate being hit like that. Although, admittedly, you're never going to be that punchy because the Dominus is still only weapon skill 3, I believe. So,
yes.
Room for improvement. Unless, of course...
Dominus is 3, Engine Seer 4. So it depends on who you want to really put it on, I guess.
I suppose... Oh, no, because the Engine Seer doesn't have the ability to access the doctrines or the Doctorin Imperiatus and Doctorin and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have the access to access those, I believe. So you couldn't increase its weapon skill.
The Tech Priest Engine Seer has the Cult Mechanicus keyword, yeah. So he would give Canticles. Oh, but is he's not Skitarii, so he doesn't get +1 weapon skill. No, you're right.
Correct. So there's that again. It's nice. I don't think you're gonna. If you're only getting one relic, I doubt this is going to be it. What's really cool about Mars and one of the stratagems that has always done well for them is Wrath of Mars. It is either 1 CP or 2 CP. 2 CP when you have a power rating which exceeds 11, and 1 CP when you have a power rating that goes below that.
11 or more.
11 or more. Sorry, yes, absolutely. Not exactly 11. 11 or greater.
11, no more, no less.
No more, no less. Always at 11 power rating. Tough luck, mate. Is it 12? Fair play. Carry on. Use this stratagem in your shooting phase when a Mars unit is selected to shoot. To the end of that phase, each time a model in that unit makes an attack, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound up to 6 mortal wounds. So this used to be bananas because it used to be uncapped. So you literally used to just go... Here is my unit of thingy-mabib robots. They are now shooting you hundreds of times. Enjoy that. Whereas now it's capped at 6. But 1 CP to do up to potentially 6 mortal wounds. Whew, that's still good.
Yeah, there's some top units for applying that too. Obviously, the Castellan robots, if you do the double Dacker build, gives you the most number of shots possible. The next best ones are the Skitaran Sicarian infiltrators, because each one could do 5 shots, and then the other one is one of the Patraxi birdmen, if I can remember their name. I'm flicking through. I'm flicking in one direction.
The ones with the taser goads and the.
It's not the sterilizers; it's the Patraxi Skystalkers. They've got the same weapon basically, which is a flechette blaster, pistol 5, strength 3, 1 damage. So you can get an awful lot of shots on.
Well, you can have a 10-man unit of those, whack them down from deep strike. They're range 18, so you can comfortably be within range of whatever you want, and then you can, shoot 50 times. Increase your ballistic skill to 2+ because you can. Maybe shenanigans it so as they're within 6 inches of a Dominus to give them re-rolling once, and then just get as many shots off as you can. Maybe you'll get 47. Maybe you get 48. Maybe you'll get 10. Some people are that unlucky. But the point is that you shoot a lot and then you go and roll a bunch of dice, and any 6s, you're having a lovely time alongside the damage they're just outputting anyway. So, yeah, no, I still like Wrath of Mars. I think it's not great in its old application, but I think it just requires people to reevaluate what they think is the way to go. Can I talk about the Forge World that I actually think is bestest, though? The one that I would like to use most of the time.
Is it the one on the next page called Lucius?
Yes, correct. I mean, it's actually quite easy to get to because it's the second one. But Lucius is the one that got me and Phil all excited.
We were looking at this and spent most of the time finding combos for it, going, "Oh, yes, this is a nice one."
Yes. So, Lucius, in terms of their core dogma, it's not much to get excited about, right? It's each time an attack...
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Well, it's good. It's just, it's let the people decide. Here we go. Well, obviously they can't feedback, but each time an attack with damage characteristic 1 is allocated to model with this dogma, add 1 to the armor save. Right? Good. Very good.
Well, good.
Well, yeah, but damage 1 weapons, they're all over the place, but I don't know. Your
Exactly.
pre-tanks used to get it. Yeah, I suppose so. All right, fair enough. I just,
Well, the thing is,
answered my question.
and this is the thing: if you're running like a Skitarii heavy army, lots of infantry seems to be like a cool new thing. If you're doing that, your opponent is going to benefit from using their 1 damage weapons. You know, their las guns, the bolt guns, not heavy bolters. You know, there is a lot of 1 damage floating around. It's not necessarily the meta though. But it might be, because currently everyone's like, oh, let's build for Space Marine, so let's take lots of heavy bolters, lots of 2 damage stuff. In which case, no, this isn't very good. But in a world where lots of people are rocking damage 1 weapons, this is super cool.
I'll tell you what, though, man. Since I saw the preview of the Beast Snaggers, I immediately start to think, like, gee, them Beast Snaggers are going to change things for people. And the Orcs in general, because the Orcs are going toughness 5 with 1 wound, and the Beast Snaggers are strength and toughness 5 with 1 wound. And it's like, wello, because all of a sudden, all of that stuff that you've got that's doing 2 damage is wasted on the Beast Snaggers, and they are just going to be everywhere. So you are going to start to find, as the game goes on, that you're going to have options. So 1 damage weapons may become more apparent. And adding 3 to the range of your weapons, actually, now that I think about it objectively, depending on our super hilarious wombo combo that we're going to talk about in a moment, that's actually really useful, because say, for example, the only gun you've got is a 12-inch flamer, making that a 15-inch flamer. It's pretty good.
No, that's true. Yeah, because we talked about for Petraxi coming down from Deep Strike with the flamer option. And one of the combos requires being within 12 inches, but obviously you've got to be outside of 9. That's a small margin to fit in all your models on to be able to target 1 unit. But now, all of a sudden, that 12 becomes 15. That gives you a lot more room to play with. So that is pretty good.
Totally. I mean, the Warlord trait might be one of the best Warlord traits in the entire book. I think, essentially, it's transhuman for Lucius core units. You can only wound on a 4+. So you're already going to have some tough as old boots, durable core unit, be that the Dragoons or... actually, it can't be the Breaches because they don't have the core keyword. But...
So the Breaches do, the Castellan robots do not.
Castellan robots do not, except you can give it to them, and we'll get to that in a moment. Breaches don't have core. They have...
they don't, sorry.
They don't, no. I'm just, but we'll get to the fact that those robots get core in a moment, because basically that's what we're saying. You put it on because there's the shenanigans that we'll get to in a moment.
Yeah, I guess one thing, let's talk about the core keyword now briefly for a second. And this is one of those weird complexities about the book. It's like, so all troops normally are core, and that is the case sort of for this book, with the exception of the Cataphren Breaches, which are troop choices, but they're not core, which is completely unusual because that's never been the case before. But that's fine. They're not infantry, they're bikers, but they've got an ability which makes them act like infantry in terms of being able to breach through walls, so they can just pass
like
through
Death Watch
infantry.
kill teams.
Yes. But then they've also got rules that make them a bit like vehicles because they can ignore the penalty for movement. Very interesting. The other one that isn't a key of note is the Castellan robots. They don't have core, but the cybernetic data smith can give them core for a turn. If they're at the start of command phase, I think you've got to be within 6 inches of them. They get core.
Well, it's just literally as long as they're within 6 or 3 inches of the data smith, they have core. It's not even a thing of giving it to them; they just have it.
No, it's at the. Wait, let's just check it's the right one. Field reprogramming action. Oh no, sorry, it's the aura. Yeah, while a friendly is within 3 inches of this model. They gain the core keyword. So it's interesting because there's a lot of abilities that just require the core keyword, but Castellan robots only go that while they're within near the cybernetic data smith. So that's something to bear in mind as an extra bit of complexity.
And the way that we have kind of asserted this is that if you have the core keyword, an ability is placed upon you that required said core keyword, losing that core keyword should not, in theory, remove the ability from you. So say, for example, you put this warlord trait on them. They met the criteria to receive the warlord trait, but then they move away from the Deus Myth, losing the core keyword. The assertion is that they still maintain that ability because they were still granted it. They just couldn't be granted it in a subsequent turn if they no longer possessed core. Do we feel accurate in our assertion?
Oh, I think that. Let's read out I know we said we weren't going to read out a lot of stuff, but this one's quite important, so we'll read it out. So it's in your command phase, select one Lucius core unit within 9 inches of this warlord until the start of your next command phase. Each time an attack is made against that unit, an unmodified wound roll of 1 to 3 fails, irrespective of any abilities or modifiers that model may have. So it says it lasts until the end of the turn. You only need to have core at the point that you select that unit to gain the ability. In my mind, it just gets it for that turn. Whether you then go off and move off in the movement phase outside of that aura ability, that seems fair game to me. I could see people arguing it, but they're wrong.
Well, I mean, we believe they're wrong, right?
Yeah.
Let's be fair about this. There are instances within the rules where they have stipulated that those kind of things come into effect. It's again, it seems reasonable to us.
Yeah, it's one of those things I can imagine they're clarifying an FAQ because of that niche of Castellan robots gaining core and losing core at certain times where it would be nice if they just was a bit more explicit, or it just needs clarifying as an FAQ, I think.
But why is this important, Phil? We wouldn't make such a big old song and a dance out of it because obviously they just stay within 3 of the Deus Myth, right? Well, there's nothing that could possibly happen to change that.
Well, the reason why they would go outside of that is you're probably going to charge a Castellan into something if you've got the punchy ones, for example. But the next thing, which is super cool, is their relic, the Solar Flare. Basically, Lucius model only once per battle in your movement phase. If you've got this relic, if you do so, the bearer and one friendly Lucius core unit within 3 inches of the bearer can be removed from the battlefield and set back up anywhere on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from the enemy. And then if those 2 models, because you could just teleport the character, but if you take the character plus one other unit, you've got to be within 6 inches of each other.
Which is very easy to do, even with the massive bases of the Castellan robots.
So we like the idea, either turn 1, potentially turn 2 if you really want to, but it almost makes sense to do turn 1. You basically take your big squad of robots.
6 robots.
You take your 6 robots. You give them the warlord trait,
punchy fists,
warlord trait ability, which means they can't be wounded on 1 to 3. Maybe that's overkill because they're pretty high toughness anyway, depending on what you're going up against, of course. But then you can immediately, at the end of your movement phase, teleport them within 9 inches across the battlefield within charging distance, and then potentially, you've got the Canticle, which gives you roll 3 dice for your charge, so you can charge those robots in. Your Data Smith gets somewhat left behind, most likely, or if you could charge him in as well, brilliant. But if it doesn't, not the end of the world. But you lose your core keyword, but you've still got the ability that gives you transfusion.
And so basically at this moment in time, you have a unit of 6 punchy robots that have now teleported in within 9 inches of the enemy. They have flamed at 15 inches because even with the punchy fists, they have still got their D6 shot flamers on the top of their heads, which I believe are -2, Phil.
They're pretty good. Hold on.
They are pretty good. I feel like they are strength 5 or strength 6.
Is this the time where we should do a little deep dive into the Castellan robot and go a bit off peak?
We probably should. If we're gonna wax lyrical about how
we're gonna talk about
good they are.
So obviously Castellan robots, weapon skill, ballistic skill 4+, strength 6, toughness 7, so they're pretty tough anyway. Only 3 attacks and a 3-up save. They come with, by default, a phosphor blaster in Sendime Combuster and a Castellan Fist. Castellan Fist gives you +1 attack each time you fight. So if you do double fist, you can get +2 attacks, which is pretty useful. So that brings you up to 5 attacks base. Phosphor Blaster is heavy 3, Strength 6, -2, 1 damage. Ignore the benefit of dense cover. The Incendium Combustor, range 12, heavy D6, Strength 5, -2, 1 damage. Automatically hits. That's pretty good. The Phosphor Blasters, which are the ones that you normally take on each arm, as it per 8th edition. Heavy 3, but could be doubled. Strength 6, -1, 2 damage. Ignore dense cover, which is pretty cool. And the fists are strength +4, so it takes you to strength 10. They're -3 AP. They're 3 damage. And as I've already mentioned, you get +1 attack.
Yep.
Plus,
Plus,
we've got the battle protocols, which they get as an ability. So they receive it at the start of the battle. They get the Aegis protocol. Now, this is where we have to flip on over back to the Cybernetica Datasmith, because he has the ability to actually change what these are. So this happens at the end of your movement phase. So you can, you've done your teleport, which happens in your movement phase, and then at the end of your movement phase, you can change your battle protocols, they're called.
Although that change doesn't occur to the subsequent turn, right?
Yes, so you got to do it a turn ahead. Basically, at the end of your movement phase, any number of cybernetic datasmith models in your arm can perform this action. Select Castellan robot units within 6 inches and select one available protocols unit from that data sheet. The action is completed at the end of your next command phase, and then it's basically active for your unit. So yeah, you got to think a turn ahead with this. A bit confusing, but by default you get a 2+ save, which is the Aegis protocol. You can change it to the Conqueror protocol, which is reroll charge rolls and weapon skill 2+. That's very good. Or the Protector protocol, which is it cannot move except for pile in or consolidate, but you have a 3+ ballistic skill. On top of that, they also have a 5+ invuln save, and each time a saving throw is made on a modified roll of a 6, the attacking model suffers 1 mortal wound because it bounces back. That's very cool. And they can also explode. Lovely.
So they are 105 points by default, 100 points if you take 2 fists, 110 points if you take 2 shooty handguns. We're saying that you take 2 fists and the flamer. And basically teleport them up the board because they now meet the criteria. Give them the ability to only be wounded on 4+. They've got all the other protective aspects baked in. For extra fun, and we will talk about this in a bit, there is an ability locked into special character nonsense, which is...
I thought you were going to talk about the stratagem.
Which stratagem are we talking about
the
here?
Crushing Weights, which is the...
Oh, yes, Crushing Weights is the... it was going to be the sting in the tail, but the extra thing you can do is for 35 points, you can have Logi, and then in your command phase, if this is part of an act... if this part is active for this model, select one friendly Forge World core unit, which again will be these Castellan robots that were in 6 of this model, until the start of your next command phase. They ignore armor penetrations of 1 and 2, so... AP1 and AP2, they're like, don't care.
That's good.
So
talking to explain what Logi is, basically you can have holy orders, which are like for Space Marines, you can upgrade a captain to a chapter master, an apothecary to a chief apothecary. Basically, each time you add a tech priest to your army, if you want, you can apply a holy order to it. There are 4 in total. They cost different points. The one we talked about is the most expensive because it's arguably the best. It's 35 points.
Easily the best.
There's was it Gene Tours, Logi, Magi, Artisans. Let's just quickly talk about them now in full. You've got the Janitors. So you've got a primary ability, which is, and they're all very similar but slightly different. They all basically reduce a specific type of stratagems. So all the stratagems are split out into different categories. They reduce a particular category by 1 CP to a minimum of 1. So for example, this the first one changes. I think is it Adaptive Mastery?
Yeah, it's the Adeptus Mechanicus specific one. So Generators is Adeptus Mechanicus specific stratagems. Logi is strategic ploy stratagems. Magi is epic deed stratagems. Oh, sorry, yeah. So the first one is battle tactic stratagem. I apologize.
That's it.
Yeah, battle tactic stratagem for generators. Logi is strategic ploys. Magi is epic deeds, and artisans is war gear stratagems.
So,
and all of those are reduced by 1 CP.
So pretty worthwhile. Then
Very
the
worthwhile.
slightly more complicated part is there's a second part, which is a progressive ability. You get an initial ability, which is on by default. As Dan said, for example, you can, in your command phase, pick a unit within 6 inches, and then until your next command phase, it ignores -1 or 2 AP. So super strong. You can upgrade it to an advanced part, but to do that, your tech priest needs to do a custom action for the turn. At the start of the command phase, you can perform that action. It is completed at the start of your next command phase. Then it replaces the initial part with the advanced part. They don't stack together. They're also very different abilities that apply to different units. So sometimes you might just want, for example, the Logi one, you'll just stick with the initial one because it is that good.
Yeah.
The advanced part, for example, is called Flaws of the Foe. In your command phase, if this part is active, select one friendly Forge World core unit or Forge World Cataphrone servitors within 6 inches of this model until the start of your next command phase. Each time a model in that unit makes a ranged attack, the target does not receive the benefits of cover against that attack. Rubbish. I mean, it's okay, but it's nowhere near as good as the ignore 1 or 2 AP, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's groovy. I mean, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily anywhere near as good as ignoring -1, -2. So we have stacked every imaginable buff on these robots. We can talk about some of the other holy orders, and we'll get to that in a second, but let's just stay on the topic. We have stacked an absolute truckload of buffs on this 600-point monolith of a unit.
Because we're mad.
And we have just hoofed it into our opponent. We've rolled 3d6 for our charge, discarding the lowest. Obviously, we can re-roll that if we need to, because it's just a CP. We are stuck in, and we are disrupting the heck out of this army. If ever there was a argument for breaking out the infiltrators once again, this codex is filled with that. Because if you aren't prepared for this smashing into you, Lord, will it smash into you.
Well, yeah. And then in addition, you can do a bunch of mortal wounds to them as well with the crushing weight stratagem. So it's only 1 CP. Use a stratagem in your charge phase. Iron Striders it works for, or cast land robots, which is why we're picking this one
What
out.
type of stratagem is it though, Phil?
Oh, it is strategic ploy.
So it's 0 CP to use.
Does it go to a minimum of 1, or does it just reduce the cost by 1?
It just says, note the CP cost is only reduced by 1 for that use of the stratagem. Any further usage of this costs the normal CP. So reduce the CP cost of the stratagem by 1. It doesn't say anything about it being reduced to a minimum.
Jeez. Okay. That's cool.
There you go, see? Look at that.
So crushing weight costs nothing. It's a free thing. Just do it. Why not? Affects Iron Striders or Castellan robots from your army. Select one enemy unit that's after they finish the charge move, select a unit that they're in engagement range with, then basically roll a dice for each robot or Iron Strider engine that is within engagement range of them. And then on a 2+, you do a mortal wound. So chances are you could, I guess statistically you're going to do, with 5 robots, you're going to do, 6 robots, you'll do 5 mortal wounds. But who knows how well you can roll.
Exactly. Or how badly you can roll for that, man. That's
true.
Always a better way of approaching it. So basically what we're saying is for a load of different things, you can have a unit that will just get stuck in and cause a number of headaches for your opponent. Noting you don't need to use these robots. You can just use dragoons, which are the chicken walker assaulty units. They are the Sindoran dragoons, and they are basically, as long as you equip them with their Tesla lance or taser lance, they are pretty fighty as well. I personally prefer it with the robots because they are way more durable. And they're just an iconic Mechanicus unit, even though technically the Dragoons have been around as long. In fact, actually, I think the Dragoons have been around longer. Potentially, I can't remember if they were in the original book or not.
I think
the
they
original
all were.
but
Yeah,
they all saw that time. But anyway, the point is that is bonkers, is what we are saying.
I know. We
something...
did have to explain a bunch of different rules, not from just a robot, but also the cybernetic datasmith, plus the abilities that upgrade a tech priest as well. And obviously, you can put that ability. Well, can you actually put it on the datasmith? I believe you can do. I'm pretty sure.
Oh yeah, all of this stuff can go on the datasmith.
So yes,
because it's a character.
He's a character. He's also a tech priest, so you can give him the relic. You can give him the warlord trait, but you might be better off giving the warlord trait to someone else that's also nearby at the start. So you can just apply that warlord trait onto them, unless you want it for multiple turns. So maybe you do want it on those guys. Even
if you want it for multiple turns, I think you want to have, because the thing is, you've got to account for, even with the 3d6, you've got to account for failing that charge. So you want the durability to be a frustrating nuisance. So you want that there, but yeah, you want the unit, one of the units at the back that isn't going forwards with these guys to have that warlord trait to then distribute it to other things that need it, not more, but just differently in that circumstance.
And I guess if you are doing it turn 1, for example, so you're a 2+ save, ignoring AP 1 and 2. That is pretty strong.
And the thing about those robots that a lot of people overlook is their movement 8. So that's even if you fluff the charge, you are running around like a lunatic. And obviously you will have baked in the idea that in the next turn, you're going to be hitting on 2s and re-rolling your charges. So you're just going to be running all over the place, causing havoc. And there's very few things in the game that are going to get rid of that. Like that is extraordinarily powerful.
Yeah, I mean, but you'd expect it to be for 600 points.
Well, exactly. And their vehicles, and in fact, it's not 600 point fills because we're paying 75 points for the datasmith. So I think he's 40 points normally, but we have to pay the 35 to make him the thing that helps them do silly nonsense, or we have to put that on something somewhere. And anyway, in the doing of, we are effectively, putting a lot of eggs into that basket. But the hilarious thing as well is the vehicles. So even if you do take some damage, you can start healing them up again, which is super funny. So I love that. I just think, again, I felt like when this book came along, people were talking about those robots like there was just no life left in them because they weren't as Dakabot as they were going to be before. Whereas now I'm looking at them going, just use them as a hammer. Yeah, they are one heck of a hammer.
It's like the double fist is good. I wonder if there's a bit more utility in terms of just doing one of each, because then you get even more shooting. You lose one attack, but it is only one attack, whereas you get an extra like 3 shots. I'm a greedy guts. I like that. And also you will be making that squad then 630 points as opposed to just 600. But was it 630? Yeah, 630. Even then though, it's a heck of a thing. And I love it. And that's not just the only good thing about Lucius. If that's not enough combos enough, there's still one more thing that we haven't talked about, which is their stratagem, Legio Teleportarium, because basically Lucius is known for teleporting titans around, if I recall correctly. So they've got this one ability, cost 1 CP. Use a stratagem before the battle during the declare reserves and transport step. Select one Lucius unit, excluding vehicles from your army. You can set up that unit in the teleportarium instead of setting it up on the battlefield. If you do so, then in the reinforcement steps of one of your movement phases, you can set this unit up anywhere on the battlefield 9 inches away from enemy model. You can use this stratagem once. Unless you're playing a strike force, which is standard 2,000 point game, in which case you can use it twice. So for 2 CP, you can stick 2 units of any power level into reserve and have them deep strike around, so they're not just outflanking. That's super powerful.
Well, yeah, but it can't be vehicles is an important thing to reiterate there.
Yeah, that's true, which is probably going to be the most expensive sort of stuff. But again, we've been looking at it. Now you can take 20-man units of Skitarii, Vanguard, or Rangers, for example. You can suddenly go, cool, that one squad of 20 men is just going to deep strike into someone's face or onto
That
an
is true.
objective.
I mean, there's certainly options with it. I think their stratagem is good, but not. It's good. It's just good.
Well, I think it gives a lot more threat, especially if you want to shunt your robots up the table or whatever you might want to move. You can then also have these 2 other units coming in the following turn to either back them up or just be a nuisance somewhere else on the board.
Yeah. I feel like I need to just make some final closing statements for why I feel like the robots are the way to go as well when you're going Lucius, which is to say that obviously people will look at the Dragoons and they will go, oh, the Dragoons are probably going to be able to do it better for cheaper. If you're taking them in a Lucius detachment, then you're not gaining the Mars stuff. So if you're really looking to optimize this, if you are really looking to get the most out of it, you really don't want to be taking the Dragoons in Lucius.
Yes, because you need the canticles to get the 3d6 charge, right?
Correct, yeah. So you're not going to benefit from the canticles and, not benefiting from the canticles. I think this is the thing. I think there is no reason why that you wouldn't, in a competitive sense, and I appreciate not everyone listening to this gives a dirty bottom to competitive play. I couldn't think of a way of PCing that, but there it was. A lot of people don't mind about competitive play that much, but from a competitive mindset, if you're looking to optimize, Scutari need to basically be Mars, and then something punchy like this could be Lucius. And if you were looking for an option to include some of the breachers or what are they called? Destroyers, the other ones.
The cat from breachers and destroyers.
Yeah, the cat from breachers and destroyers. Thank you. If you were looking at a troop choice around those, I'd say that probably a Lucius detachment of those is actually really valuable because you're increasing that weapon range and you are getting your +1 save for damage 1 weapons. So maybe do a detachment of that, build it around being a Cult Mechanicus detachment, and then do a Mars detachment built around being Scutari. And then chuck in a Knight of the Cog for good measure, because who doesn't love a knight? But yeah, that's my theory why I feel like the robots is the way to go. Plus, also, if you're buying the Dragoons chassis, the Iron Striders, or the I think they're just keyword Iron Striders for all of them. Yeah, Iron Strider engine. I would be taking the Ballistiari. I'd be taking the gun version of them anyway, because I feel like that's the better of the 2 options. So yeah, if it were my money, I'd be doing shooty Iron Striders rather than the Dragoons.
Yes, yeah, then you can just redeploy them in a way which gives you line of sight on something, but you can still deploy them quite defensively potentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you can just use their movement 10 and move them around and do some stuff with it. There's options there, right? I think, yeah, that robot combo to me is dirty because it's just one of those things that I'd just be like, right, okay, cool. What do I do now? Because they will just tear the heart out of a lot of people's armies. A lot of people won't see that coming and won't know what to do about it when it comes their way. So there you go. Shock and amaze your friends with a 6-man unit of robots.
And instantly lose them as well.
Well, exactly. Oh, come on now. Friendships are more important than games of 40k. I mean, think of all the times I've done silly things to you, Phil, in a game of 40k, and here we are together.
I know.
Exactly. He says that with so much sort of deep-rooted anger. You hear it there in his voice. I know.
Yes. Oh, those flyers. Oh.
I never played you with that flyer list, did I? Only maybe when we were doing actual practice the day before a tournament.
That was more than enough. Once was enough, thank you.
Yeah, exactly. I think I actually only ever did play with you once, and you were just literally like, oh, nothing in my army can actually hit you. Great.
Actually, yes, no, I think it was a very quick game.
Yeah, it was one of those ones where you're like, why are we even doing this, Dan? And I'm like, I don't know. It's fun to roll dice, isn't it? No. Oh.
No. Do we want to talk about some of the other Forge Worlds? We've obviously waxed lyrical about the first 2 and taken up a lot of time in doing so. But do we want to look through some of the others, or should we just call out a couple that we do like and just briefly talk about their dogma and that's it?
Yeah, so I really like Metallica. I love Metallica from the perspective that they actually have a lot of interesting synergies with House Raven, and those were explored in the Book of Rust. So there is still opportunities to synergize Raven and House Raven of the Imperial Knights and Forge World Metallica. Forge World Metallica has historically been able to advance and still fire assault weapons with no negative to shooting. But now you can also move and fire heavy weapons with no negative, and you count units that you are within range of as being under half strength. So essentially, if they fail a leadership test, their combat attrition will trigger on ones or twos, unless, of course, they're Krieg, Phil. Hey, there you go.
Yay. Actually, no, that's interesting, because this specifically says they count as being below half strength, but I guess it's a modifier that I then ignore, I guess. So yeah,
yes,
I'm below half strength for rules purposes, but I ignore the modifier that the below half strength gives you. It's a bit odd with this that they just don't say you get an extra -1, but I guess it's so when you are below half strength, you're not -2. So it's not as good as an actual -1 modifier. But it's not bad, and obviously it only works when you're within engagement range. But it's good. It's pretty good. The fact that you ignore, you can advance and shoot assault weapons with no penalty, and you can move your heavy weapons and suffer no penalty to hit. But fantastic. That is really good.
They're great for Vanguard. Vanguard with those assault-free arc carbines. Very good times with those guys. Their relic I like only just because I think it's funny. It's basically you give yourself an extra arm, a metallic arm, a superior arm, like the old Quibi show. Did you ever watch any of Quibi's old ridiculous shows, Phil? Do you even know what Quibi is?
Oh, isn't it that platform with like micro videos that literally no one ever watched? I didn't even think it came out in this country.
It was on for like 6 months, and I saw a review of some of its shows, and it had one of these like Twilight Zone shows where a woman lost her arm in a tree accident. So she was like cutting down a tree and she lost her arm, and then they replaced her arm with a cybernetic prosthesis, and that was by her request made of solid gold, and then the gold trickled into her body and killed her through some kind of gold related degenerative thing. And then she haunted her deadbeat husband, who invested all of his money in both the construction and materials for said golden arm. So he had to like grave rob her. It's a whole thing. It was a mad show, but it's like that. It's like that golden arm thing, which is also, I think, a film about arm wrestling. But anyway, we go on. So many golden arm references today. But this one's called the adamantium arm, or the adamantine arm. So I'm not even accurate in so much as it's not even made of gold. But the point is, it's an extra melee attack at ×3 strength. And that sounds groovy.
Strength 12, basically.
Well, strength 12. Yeah. So, assuming you're strength 4. I don't know if anything you just put this on would be strength 4. I mean, you did have plenty of time. you had plenty of time to work with there, Phil. So
the most of them that you'd put it on a strength 4.
There you go. So anyway, I don't know. I mean, Metallica I like because of the synergies in Book of Rust with Raven. That's where it's
and there's even more that you can unlock with that. The army there, because you get a bunch of extra warlord traits, not just the one that you're given here. So there's potentially a lot you could do there. And then obviously there was that kind of the destroyer breacher cohort thing that was very focused around Mechanicus build, which you can always plug into any of the Forge Worlds because it wasn't locked to a particular one. So that might have some interesting synergies if you want to go heavy on your breachers or even your Castellan robots, for example. So there's some cool ones.
Good times. Which one would you like to call out, Phil?
Ooh, I would like to do Styges.
Ooh, Styges. They used to be popular because they were like the -1 ones.
Yeah, so Styges 8. They've got shroud protocols. So basically, if your vehicle is 18 inches away when it gets shot at, it counts as being in cover. Sorry, being in dense cover, so it's -1 to hit. If any of your core units, Is that right? Excluding vehicles, units without the core keyword. Oh, so it does cover the. I'm just trying to think whether it works on Castellan robots then. It excludes vehicles without core. So if you did have core, for example, you were a vehicle like a Castellan robot that briefly has the core keyword due to your cybernetic datasmith, then this does affect you. Otherwise it's 12 inches basically is what I'm trying to say. So if you're a vehicle with a core keyword, 18 inches away, you're -1 to be shot. If you're anything else, which includes vehicles with core, and you get shot at from 12 inches or more away, you're also at -1. Also, when you get charged, you can hold steady or set to defend for free, which is kind of cool.
This was one of those really interesting instances where we came across these rules, and obviously me and Phil, as champions of the game, know instinctively what that means, but we were surprised that they didn't actually make any reference to what this is, because it isn't actually a rule that if you went onto the Warhammer app and typed in, it would even just pop up. You have to know where this exists, and this is in reference to terrain rules. So us, the hardcore 40k gamer base, will look at that and go, ha 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 ha, of course. But to your average gamer, I find it really interesting that they didn't actually at any point say reference terrain section of core rule book,
so there is a couple of times where they do reference core rules, and they do say see the Warhammer 40k core rulebook, for example. They don't mention it here, and if I remember rightly, in terms of the order, hold steady is +1 to your Overwatch, so 5 up.
Correct.
And set to defend is +1 to hit in combat when you finally get around to being in combat. So in fact, you get a universal 5+. Overwatch, I think, is quite cool.
Yes, I mean it's definitely cool. It's just frustrating that they haven't given tools to players who maybe aren't as knowledgeable as you or I. So hopefully someone out there is reading along with us and has gone, oh, that's what that means. I've been looking everywhere. So there you go. Hope we offered you a valuable service.
That's true. Then you get the Warlord trait Veiled Hunter, which is a really clever ability. At the start of your first battle round, select up to 2 friendly Styges units wholly within your deployment zone, remove them from the battlefield, set them up anywhere else within your deployment zone, or you can put them into a strategic reserve for free. And then you can also put them in there regardless of, CP spending or how many units are already in strategic reserve. So potentially you can go over your half of your army limit for stuff that goes in strategic reserve. So a very good way of putting your army in a sort of vulnerable position to like bait your opponent to go for those units. And then this happens at the very first battle round. You can suddenly be like, nope, I'm moving them elsewhere. So I think that's very clever.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a really tactically shenanigansy thing, and I like a bit of shenanigans. So no, I dig it. I think Styges have got some real viability. I think there's some interesting stuff in this.
The relic I won't really talk about. It's like a 12-inch mortal bomb thing that's a Jericho ability. They're very cool. But the other interesting one is the clandestine infiltration, which is a 1 CP strat. Use this stratagem during deployment. Select 1 core infantry unit from your army. When you set up that unit, it can be set up anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from the enemy deployment zone and any enemy units. So you've got tons of abilities that allow you to redeploy, put things in deep strike, outflank or whatever, in addition to your normal kind of coming in from reserves, plus everything else that is on the table is probably -1 to hit. That is really cool and defensive. I like it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think Styges have got some viability for sure. I think if it wasn't for the obvious might of Mars and Lucius, I think you could still find a place for Styges depending on your playstyle. I think Metallica works because of the access to Book of Rust. Ryza are an interesting one because Ryza used to be like the plasma guys, but you can't really get squads with that much plasma anymore, at least not in a kind of meaningful amount. That their kind of plasma specialist stratagem becomes super valuable. And then from a dogma perspective, each time models with a dogma make a melee attack. If it made a charge move, was charged, performed a heroic intervention this turn, add 1 to the attack's wound roll. It's fair enough. And add 1 to the charge rolls made for the units with this dogma. It's a fighty thing. I think if you're going to do it, you're going to be using like Rust Stalkers or
you've got to really lean into
priests.
those.
Yeah, you got to lean into the combat with Riser. Graya, whatever they are. I mean, again, they've got the whole automatically passing combat attrition test, so they can fail a leadership test, but all subsequent combat attrition is automatically passed. So you'll lose the 1 for failing the leadership test, but you won't lose any subsequent models. And each time a model with this dogma loses a wound to mortal wounds on a 5-up, it's ignored. But it feels fine.
When a certain canticle is active, it becomes a 4+.
Correct. Yeah. I think we referenced that when we were talking canticles. And yeah, Agrippine, whatever it was. Each time models in this dogma makes a range attack, that unit targets a unit in half range. The armor penetration characteristic is improved by 1. So if you were AP dash, now you're AP 1. If you're within half range, which can actually be pretty good. And each time an enemy unit declares a charge against a unit with this dogma, if that unit is not within engagement range of an enemy unit, it can hold steady or set to defend, which is basically the exact same thing that Stygies got. So yeah, which we have already said is... Oh, hang on. What's interesting, though, about that is Stygies don't have the engagement range stipulation.
Oh, wait. Well, they don't need to be within engagement range for that, though. Oh,
no, but so each time an enemy unit declares a charge against this unit, with this dogma, if the unit is not within engagement range, it can hold steady or set to defend. Whereas in the case of Stygies, each time a unit in this dogma declares a charge, none of the target. Oh God, we got it wrong. Yeah, we got confused, everybody. So Stygies prevent your opponent from doing this. Gain it. There we go. So actually, Stygies are even potentially a little better there. There you go. Well done, Stygies.
Yeah, that whole steady and set to defend, that rule that everyone pretty much forgets about all the time.
Always. No one ever remembers that that's a thing because no one's ever in cover in 40k 9th edition because they're always hiding behind the wall or just outside the wall or they're fighting off the other side of it. So yeah, there you go. I mean, look, from a Forge World perspective, I like the breadth and depth of these abilities. I think there's some interesting stuff there. Again, the fact that you can argue that there are maybe 4 options that are, or all the options have some viability in some way, shape, or form, depending on your builds. But it is evident that Mars and Lucius are your top dogs.
There's also the Distant Worlds again, where you get 4 options. And I think they're all pretty solid as well, depending on what kind of build you want to go for.
Yeah, exactly. But anyone out there who is thinking of running slaved system Forge Worlds, where you basically do the inheritors of the Primarch, it's AdMech, guys. Just use them as whatever you want. Like if you want to be Mars and you've painted them yellow, no one cares. If that was Space Marines, you'd be in trouble. But they ain't Space Marines, so don't worry about it.
True.
Stratagems, Phil. This is the thing we are the least researched on, even though we had some points to make about them a moment ago. There are some interesting stratagems in this book with some interesting, fun elements, shall we say. One of them being that...
Is it the Booster Thrust one?
Yes. Yeah. So that was one we did touch upon because, well, it's just really interesting. So Booster Thrust specifically affects the birdie men. What are they called again now, Phil? Help me here. Help me.
The Patraxi.
The Patraxi. So either the sterilizers or the Tesla Goad shoot ones. You can essentially, right, the way the rule is written is that essentially, let me get this wording 100% right. Booster Thrust. Use this stratagem at the end of your turn. Select one Paraxi unit from your army. remove that unit from the battlefield. In the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, you can set that unit back up on the battlefield anywhere there's more than 9 away from an enemy. Now, if you remember, we were saying before, if you take these guys as Mars and you have a 10-man unit of these with Wrath of Mars, and you are blasting out a bucket load of shots, either from your flamers or from the Daka guns of the Taser Gourd guys, this just becomes crazy because you can drop them down, you can distribute an absolute truckload of damage, and then for 1 CP, you just disappear and go, cool, I'll be back to do it again next turn.
Yeah, and you can still also charge in and do combat with them as well. But if you don't want to take risks, you can just ignore, because they're not bad in combat. And the thing is, the thing that allows them to do it, they've all got the thermal riders ability, which allows them to deep strike as usual within 9 inches or just outside 9 inches. So they can keep doing that every turn. Yeah.
The fact that actually you make a good point there, because there's not even a stipulation on the stratagem that you can't be within engagement range to trigger it.
No, so you can deep strike down over 9 inches away. If you're lucky and you shoot at them, obviously, first of all, and as we said, the phosphor torch one is only 12-inch range, so it might be difficult to get everyone sort of within, outside of 9, but inside of 12. Whereas the Skystalker version with the flechette carbines, which is assault 5, strength 3, 1 damage, is 18-inch range, so you've got a bit more flexibility there. But if you're on that 9-inch border, then you can try and get a charge in. You can do some damage because they're not bad. Two attacks each. The Patraxi Sterilizers have a swooping strike ability, which says each time the unit fights, if it made a charge move or was charged, then the unit is until it's resolved, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of this model. So actually, those guys have 3 attacks each. They're just strength user. Oh, they got taser codes as well. So they're both. In fact, they're the better ones in combat. The ones with the flamers, the other ones that are shooting. Yeah, they're okay in combat, but but they've got the longer range.
Sorry. Okay. So the ones with the
flamer, the sterilizers have the 12-inch flamer, but they've also got +1 attack when they charge in. So they're doing 3 attacks each. Your officer, your alpha, has an extra attack anyway. So they're your slightly better ones, and basically they can both be armed with the same melee weapons anyway.
Yeah. So okay, fair enough. So depending on how you want to build it out, you've got some options. I prefer the flexibility of the Skystalkers over the Sterilizers because I like the extra range, because I think I can shoot at something and then charge something else. Obviously, you need to manage the what you're charging into, because you obviously don't want to receive the attacks in return and then have that, induce casualties and then have that kind of affect, the viability of this strategy turn on turn. This stratagem is clearly going to get FAQ'd, though, everyone, right? Like, let's not. I'm saying this, and it's in there, but unless you really like these models, don't go crazy on this. Like, maybe buy a unit because you like it, but don't bank on this being here.
For 5, let's say you spend 5 CP, you can have a unit that literally can be off the board in your opponent's shooting phase every turn, and then drop down in your turn, shoot, and then disappear again. That is 100% broken. Like if they did it, but they can only do it once per game, fine. If they want it to keep doing that, you could up it to 2 or even 3 CP to limit the amount of times they could do it. But I imagine they will change it so you can't do this stratagem on the turn in which you've deep struck down. So you've got to be on the board for at least a turn, and then you can bog off back to the sky.
The good old sky. Bog off I shall.
Exactly.
So that stratagem is good. What's the next one we want to talk about, Phil?
Am I going to pick one?
Yeah, why not? I mean, okay. I just kind of bulldozed in and went, let's talk about that. So why don't you do that?
Fair enough. I'm going to pick Binaric Override for 1.
Binaric Override?
Binaric.
Banana override.
Banana override. Override your bananas.
What is that? Is it a battle tactic? An epic deed?
It is a strategic ploy.
Oh, so again, wouldn't cost maybe as many CPs if you were using the thing that we talked about earlier that makes them cost.
And it might be you would want to do this when you're doing that thing.
So well, what's it do, Phil? Tell me more.
Use this stratagem at the start of any phase. Select one Castellan robot unit. Here we go.
Here we go, baby.
And one of the available protocols found on its data sheet. That protocol replaces the one that is currently active for that unit. Until the end of the game, that unit's active protocols cannot be changed. Bit of a downside.
It's not. Because you're always going to want it to be re-rolling charges and hitting on twos.
Yes. No, that's true. You can
if
only
you're taking it the way we were saying. If you're going to do a general thing, maybe. But yeah.
True. Yeah, you can only use a stratagem once. So I like that you can start off in the Aegis, turn 1. You can keep it on that one. If you fail your charge, great. It doesn't matter. You've got your 2-up save. So you hopefully weather the storm for a turn. But in the fight phase, you then drop this bad boy down. Or maybe you...
Can you use this in any phase?
At the start of any phase. So you could do it in. You could either do it in the charge phase to get your +1. Was it +1? No, it was reroll charge rolls.
Reroll charge rolls, yeah.
But you potentially might want to keep it until your fight phase when you know you've gotten in, because you don't want to lose your 2-up save if you fail your charge, because you can always spend a CP to just reroll your charge roll anyway. So I would rather take that cost. So I would do that.
I would do that too, to be fair. Although, here's the thing, though, actually, now that you're saying this, it's almost like you may as well spend the CP to commit to the re-roll early doors, because in theory, the way that this is rolled out is you've already put in motion them changing to this in the subsequent turn. So really, the only way that this becomes beneficial to you is if you reap the benefits of all of it from the outset, because otherwise you're just going to eventually get into it.
But you basically get an extra turn of in combat of being on 2+ to hit.
I suppose there is the point, right? It's like, I suppose if you know that you've got this in the chamber, so to speak, you know you got this as an option, you can not change your protocol until it is necessary for you to do so, and you can change it on the fly. So it's a good piece of tactical flexibility. So you can keep that 2+ save in effect, hit on freeze, which is no massive hardship, get the reroll, or rather get the extra dice for the initial charge. Yeah, all right, yeah.
Because if you change protocols, you're hitting on 2+, you're doing your double fist spot, so there isn't much of a negative, because you'll have the flamer as well, so you also hit. So there's almost no downside to switching. Obviously, you're losing your 2+ save, but that's something you just have to take the hit on anyway. But you basically get depending on which canticles is active, you can have a 3d6 charge, taking the lowest dice off, with a reroll on top of that. It's like you've got a pretty good chance of pulling off a 9-inch charge with that kind of bonus.
Yeah. No, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. One of the ones that I would talk about from battle tactics, potentially as an interesting option, is the 1 CP elimination volley. So this is specifically for the Cataphrons when shooting. Now, one of the interesting things about the Cataphrons is they have access to the heavy grav cannons. And the heavy grav cannons are strength 5 -3, 1 damage. Each time an attack made with this weapon is allocated to a model with a save characteristic of 3+ or better, that attack has a damage characteristic of 2. There's a lot of shots in that in terms of consistency. But being strength 5 means that in a lot of instances, say, for example, you're firing at Gravis, or say, for example, you're firing at even, a Space Marine unit of any sort. In fact, in a lot of instances, you're only going to be winning on freeze, right? So the fact that you can, for 1 CP, get 6s to auto wound is actually quite useful, because you're greatly increasing the amount of actual damage that you're outputting. Because, say, for example, you have a squad of 5 of these guys doing 25 shots, working on the mass hammer, as is the want of some people. That is, in theory, between 4 and 5 auto wounds that will be passed through. And then that would then correlate to 5 auto wounds, say, if I'm going heavy on the things, and then you would theoretically, out of 25 shots, you should miss something like 8 times or something, 9 times. So yeah, and then wounds, say if you are shooting at toughness 5 models, maybe you only get 12 wounds through normally, or maybe even less than that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, it was an interesting one. I don't think it's game breaking, but I think it's one of those ones that adds a lot of interesting flavor to that unit, gives them some extra fun in terms of options. And it's 1 CP. It's an interesting one. I don't think it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen, but it's a nice one.
True. I thought you were going to suggest you'd use it on sort of really tough vehicles that you're going to struggle to wound anyway, because obviously strength 5,
as well.
So toughness, normally you'd be wounding, toughness 8 models, for example, on a 5. But if you're then passing the whole wound step anyway, and then you're -3, and then you're 2 damage, you can actually do a lot of anti-tank damage with those things, unless of course they've got lots of universal -1 damage like your dreadnoughts.
Yeah, but if they're not dreadnoughts, if they're Lehman Russes, for example, being able to auto wound on 6s to hit is actually quite big, because you're just going to start peeling off those wounds, which is actually really valuable. So yeah, no, you make a better example. I can't believe I didn't think of that myself when I started to kind of concoct examples. But yeah,
that is
2 damage.
I am the 1 and you are the 8.
Well, exactly. Exactly. There we go. And well done on remembering that, because obviously we recorded that intro yesterday and here we are now. So good work. Eddie, what other one would you like to call out, Phil?
I found a good one. It's a bit expensive, but is a bit guard-esque, so I quite like it. Galvanic Volley Fire for 2 CP. Use a stratagem in your shooting phase. When using a Skitarii Ranger unit from your army and it's selected to shoot, until the end of the phase, the Galvanic Rifle models that are equipped with have the type characteristic of Rapid Fire 2. That's the general weapon that they've all got. Galvanic Rifle. Is that right? I'm just trying to think. It says every model is equipped with a Galvanic Rifle. Right, so they're heavy 2. Oh, interesting. I never really clocked that. Heavy 2, strength 4, -1 damage. I was confused by the fact they're heavy. I wasn't expecting them to be heavy. And now all of a sudden you're changing it to Rapid Fire 2, which is 4 shots in rapid fire range.
Yeah.
Especially if you've done, for example, that sneaky redeploy with your stratagem on your 20 rangers,
hitting on 2s.
If you're doing it in that sort of, or maybe you'd have to. Oh yes, because it's a Skitarii thing, so you can activate it in a different thing from your canticles. That's something you've got to remember, people. Yeah, so that seems pretty good.
It does seem pretty good, to be fair. Being able to, all of a sudden, if you've got, say, a 10-man unit that was prior to this shooting 20 shots, now doing 40 shots. I mean, you don't need to be a mathematician to realize that 40 is a far greater number than 20.
I'm like, how do you play Skitarii Rangers normally if all their weapons are heavy?
You use them more. Most people with the Rangers use them as just really annoying little nuisance units. Yeah, like if Rangers were anything, they would be wasps in so much as they're not really that bothersome, but people get annoyed by them. Their presence is frustrating.
Yeah, I guess what was the one that ignored the penalties? It was Metallica. So they'd be really good with Metallica because then you can obviously move around without that penalty to hit. But yeah, that's. Yeah.
Well, Metallica is specifically assault weapons, so it's not.
It's assault fire. And heavy.
And heavy, yeah, but this isn't Eva in this instance with your stratagem, it becomes rapid fire.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just talking about normally with
Right, yes,
rangers when they are heavy. Yeah, how would you get around that? So you could take them with Metallica.
With Metallica, yeah, exactly. But yeah, in the case of them becoming rapid fire, it's all good either way anyway. But yeah, no, it's a pretty decent one. I suppose we should probably talk about the one where the horses move when you declare them as a target for a charge, right? Because that's the one that people like. I've said it out loud now, but I can't remember for the life of me what it is. I think it's a strategic play, potentially. Yeah, I think it's called... where is it now? Help me, Phil. Help me.
It's not under the strategic clause.
Is it not?
Well...
No, it is. It is.
It
is called Tactica Oblique.
Right.
It's in the bottom left.
I was expecting it to be some kind of runaway thing, so I didn't... the title doesn't really make sense with what it does. I mean, maybe
no. Well, use the stratagem in your opponent's charge phase when a Sybarized rider unit from your army is selected as a target of charge. If the unit is not within engagement range of any enemy units, it can make a normal move until the end of the phase. That unit cannot fire, overwatch, or set to defend. Your opponent can select a new target. So where that's different from what it was before is you can now select a new target for your charge. But obviously, a lot of people are just going to go fishing with this unit and just stick it out far in advance of anything else you could charge. So you're going to declare it as a target, and then for 2 CP, it's just going to run away. And if I'm not mistaken, those horses move 12 inches, thus making it impossible for you to catch them. Sound about right, Phil?
You are 100% correct.
There you go. There you go. So, I mean, again, interesting in terms of an option. Strange that they kept it in there in some respects, because I know there were a few people who found it a bit egregious in some way, shape, or form. But I don't know. I mean, 2 CP is a lot. And the unit that this is on, right? I know movement blocking and all this sort of stuff is super, super important in the competitive landscape. But, you know, let's be real about the riders, right? They are not that durable. They are a 2 wound, toughness 4+ save unit with a 5+ invuln, admittedly, but you know, a volley of normal bolt rifles from a 10-man intercessor squad, or two 5-man intercessor squads will pretty much whittle a 6-man unit of these riders down to nothing. So yeah, they're a nuisance for sure. And obviously if you can knowingly declare them as the target of the charge, knowing full well that you don't care about getting into them and get your opponent to blow 2 CP on it, fantastic. But the thing is that, yeah, I don't know. I think that stratagem is strong, but I think that it's overrated as an overarching kind of tactical play for the army. I don't think it's got the same, chops that it maybe felt like it did early doors. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know. I mean, how do you feel about that as a strat, Phil? Do you wish your Death Riders could do it?
Well, I was going to say they're clearly not as durable as Death Riders.
Even close.
The Sulphur Hounds are now, I think, the same price, whereas the Raiders are slightly cheaper. The stratagem is good. I think the problem people had with it is the fact of you can't then declare a charge against anything else. So if they were, for example, move blocking, it's just like, oh great, that was a waste. I could have, maybe charged something else instead. If these, because they do get pre-game move, and they can't end up within 9 inches of an enemy model, so they can get some good move blocking in, especially if you go first. So you get 9-inch move plus your normal 12. You can be all over the place. And then if they're the only unit, yes, you are forcing that person to then not charge anything else, but there was nothing else to charge against anyway, so it's not that big a deal. And for 2 CP as well, I don't know if that's what it was before. I suspect it might be 1 CP as a guess. But yeah, I mean, it seems fine. I think it's all right.
Any other stratagems you want to call out, Phil? I know we talked about the being heavy, or whatever it's called, the one where you get to do more wounds on 2+ already. So once you've made a charge move with robots or dragoons or iron striders for 1 CP crushing weight, 2+, you do more wounds, which is pretty cool. Any other ones you want to call out, Phil? I've got a couple that I'd still like to
I'll
talk about.
let you talk about them then, yeah.
So Machine Spirit Vengeance is pretty amazing. It basically is for 1 CP, you automatically explode a vehicle. So there's a lot of really interesting tactical instances where being able to guarantee an exploding vehicle is very valuable. Again, you could look at this with this robot thing that we've been talking about throughout, but I don't think that's really that great because it's a 3-inch radius and it does 1 mortal wound. But if you were looking at, for example, the Archaeotepta Fuselave or whatever it's called, the bomber variant of the flyer, it's relatively cheap. It already is doing more wounds as it flies over stuff. And then for 1 CP, you can automatically explode it. It's got a pretty decent base size, so you're going to get a 6-inch D3 mortal wound explosion off on top of everything else. So you can position that guy in such a way as to make him a real nuisance. So you can use like bombs on the way in. And then obviously when they take him out, you can explode him. And obviously you can do it with their Dune Riders as well. And their Dune Riders are, again, 6-inch range, D3 mortal wounds. So yeah, any of that stuff where you can auto explode, I think that's really, really, weaponizing the vehicles of the Mechanicus in an interesting way. And yeah, I just think it's a good option. Auto exploding is pretty fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Obviously, it can't combo with your knights that you might want to take because they've got the wrong keyword. It seems like everything will just do D3 mortal wounds, so it's okay. You're not doing a crazy amount of damage, but if you got something placed correctly, and you say those bombers might be the ones that could do it, yeah, that's not bad.
Yeah, if you're going to be taking those bombers, it's something cool to have in your back pocket in case you need to call upon it. And again, I've been caught out by it because this still existed in the old version of the Mechanicum book, and it did catch people out quite a lot. The fact that you were, destroying vehicles and then suffering quite a lot of damage from them, especially when they're like sacrificial, like the bomber. This was also a stratagem that I still haven't really seen employed by orc players yet, but they did have that with their burner bombers, right, where you could literally drop a bunch of bombs and then dive bomb with the plane afterwards. Like, it was like the most crazy thing. Like, you could literally just go, here's a plane, here's an absolute truck ton of mortal wounds, enjoy them, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, but I haven't really seen used to any great effect. And obviously New Orcs is coming fairly soon, so not one to get preoccupied with. Any others, Phil? Anything you can think of? Come on, you gotta have one more in your mind.
I will randomly select one then.
Sure, why not? Eh? This might be the stuff of legends.
Oh wait, there is one that I think. Oh, was it a stratagem or was it just no? I think it was actually a combo. But let's do this one anyway. Electro-filament countermeasures for 2 CP. Use a stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select one Archaeopter model in your army that is equipped with a command uplink and one enemy unit within 6 inches of that model. Until the start of your next movement phase, that unit is not affected by any aura abilities. Not affected by any aura abilities of other enemy units. So basically, you can select a unit and have that unit not gain any benefits of an aura. So you're not switching off the aura, you're just selecting one unit that can't gain that aura, which I think is what they've changed from the previous one, because I seem to have a feeling it used to switch off auras.
Yeah, whereas now it's not quite as cool, but still good. So there you go. There's a bit of a rough overview of the glorious stratagems. Next in the list of things is warlord traits. What's interesting about the warlord traits is they have both tech priest warlord traits and Skitarii warlord traits, noting that the only thing that gets Skitarii warlord traits is one model. So they have given us 6 warlord traits for a single model.
Yeah, for that Skitarii marshal. I mean, I guess that's why they maybe felt they needed to create that marshal in the first place. So there was warlord traits to give it.
So tech priest warlord traits are as follows. You have emotionless clarity. In your command phase, select one friendly core or one Cult Mechanicus core unit within 6 of this warlord. Until the start of your next command phase, that unit is eligible to charge in a turn in which it fell back. It's good. Being able to charge when you fall back is interesting. Could combo quite interesting with some of the Riser, Ruststalker stuff that we might have been talking about before. Could combo quite nicely with a big unit of Castellan robots that want to go punchy. So yeah, not without its options. What do you reckon of that, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's all right. Yeah.
You're not gonna
do it on that punchy stratagem because you're going to take that. Was it Lucius Warlord trait instead?
Exactly. And if that's not enough, you're just going to kill everything you charge into anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Because I can't see too much standing up to what will inevitably come their way. Yeah. What's the next one, Phil?
The next one is Masterwork Bionics. I actually really like this one. This warlord has a 4+ invulnerable save. Each time an attack is allocated to it, subtract for damage by 1. This is what Belisarius Cool has. He has a 5+ in Vun save innately, so it becomes 4+. And also he's subtracting -1 damage, which is really good. I don't think it's probably that useful on anyone else but him. I mean, if you want to make a kind of close combat-y, tech priest or one of the others, then yeah, it might be worth it because there's some cool weapon relics that you can load onto them as well. But yeah, I do like it though.
Yeah, the HQ section is genuinely the part of the book that lets these guys down the most. It's very unlikely that you're going to go heavy on characters with this army because they don't really do much. The third one is first-hand field testing. So first-hand field testing. When you select this warlord trait, select one weapon this warlord is equipped with, add 1 to the strength and damage characteristics of this weapon, noting that weapon cannot be a relic. You'll never take this. Unless you do, in which case, fair enough. But you will never take this.
Right. The one you probably will take, though, is the next one, which is Necromechanic. When the Warlord uses Master of the Machine's ability, which is to repair a vehicle with D3 wounds, you do flat 3 wounds.
Which is, good, right? Guaranteeing regenerating 3 is great.
So stick that on your Tech Priest, you're done.
The next word, or next warlord trait, is a word I'm going to struggle with, so I'm going to give it a try. Cartogrammatist.
Cartogrammatist?
Yeah, cartogrammatist. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's the warlord trait number 5. When you select this warlord trait, select one friendly Forge World Cult Mechanicus core unit from your army. That unit gains the following ability. Orbital Teleportarium. During the deployment, you can set up this unit in orbital instead of setting up on the battlefield. If you do so, then in the reinforcement step of one of your movement phases, you can set up this unit anywhere on the battlefield, more than 9 away from any enemy models. So you can basically take a unit and put it into Deep Strike. Way.
That's great. Cult Mechanicus core. As we said, I don't think there's really any vehicles that are core. Obviously, with the exception of your Castellan robots, but obviously at this point,
and your Dune Riders or your Iron Striders.
Yes, but with the Castellan robots, they're not core until they're on the table next to your cybernetic datasmith, so you can't use this on them.
No, but you could use it on your Iron Striders.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, or other things that are core.
And then the last
Skitarii Vanguard.
That's true. Last one is Supervisory Radiance. At the start of a fight phase, select one friendly Cult Mechanicus core unit within 9 inches of the Warlord. Until the start of the next fight phase, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. Well, that's all right.
That's all right. They're all right, is what I would say about them. But none of them are as good as giving a unit transhuman. So there you go. That's pretty much where those eggs are going. All into the Lucius basket. Skitarii Warlord traits, are these any better? Let's find out. So, in your command phase, select one friendly Skitarii core unit within 9 of this Warlord, or select one friendly Forge World core data tether unit in the battlefield until the start of your next command phase. If that unit is performing an action, it can make a ranged attack, and that action does not fail. Ooh, that's good. I like that. That's always a nice one. It's not as good as the Death Watch variant, because the Death Watch variant does it in an aura. This is just select a unit. But anything that you can do to do actions and then not break those actions while still being able to actually play a role in the battlefield. Top marks. And when you start to see what the changes are to the secondaries in the game, there seems to be a good emphasis on these action-led secondaries. So having the ability to do a secondary, or rather do an action, and still shoot, A-okay with me. Again, not the best thing in the world, but it's got some options.
That's true. Next one, Battlesphere uplink. In your command phase, select one friendly Skitarii core unit within 9 inches. There's a bit of a theme here. Or select one friendly core data tether unit, which I believe is mostly HQs, but not all.
I mean, we should probably establish, Phil, from this point onwards, they all start the same. So we may as well just read the bit.
Right. Okay.
At the bottom.
Well done.
I'm just saying.
So, until the start of your next command phase, they don't suffer the penalty for firing heavy weapons on the turn that they moved, or assault weapons on the turn that they advance. Really good.
So it's the Metallica Dogma, but as a warlord trait.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, no, I like it. I prefer it as a Dogma rather than a warlord trait, but is what it is. Programmed retreat. Again, this will affect the same things as the previous two, that being Skitarii core and or core data tether units within 9. Until the start of your next command phase, that unit is eligible to shoot in a turn in which it fell back, which, as anyone who has played Ultramarines knows, is well good. And this isn't even -1. It's full ballistic skill, so good times.
True. Yeah. Again, you gotta do it in your command phase, so you got to plan ahead with what you're doing with your falling back. But that's really good. Archived engagement, as Dan said, is the same bit at the beginning. Until the start of your next command phase, if that unit is within engagement range of any enemies at the start of the fight phase, it can fight first that phase. Pretty good. Which
is good, because at the moment your opponent would be starting to fight first, whereas this time you're going to do it instead. Good for the combat specialist units. But the thing is, with the way that the AdMech roll, the combat stuff they've got is so punchy, it's almost certainly going to kill anything it gets into. So the likelihood of you needing to worry about this is low.
Unless you're going to tag into another unit.
Oh, true. Yeah, I suppose obviously if you sweep in afterwards, if you're really killy, it's yeah. Then we've got Firepoint telemetry cache. In your command phase, we know all this stuff. Until the start of your next command phase, each time a range attack is allocated to a model in that unit, it targets as it is treated as receiving the benefits of light cover against that attack. And if that model is entirely or within a terrain feature and has the infantry keyword, add an additional one to the armor saving throw made against that attack. So essentially, you become like a scout in a camo cloak, or rather, not a camo cloak, because I think that's +2. So you become like an Elder Ranger, because that's +1.
That's pretty good. Yeah, not bad. Last one, Eyes of the Omnissiah. You can, at the start of your next command phase, you can reroll the advance roll and charge rolls made for that unit.
Yeah, again, would have been even better. Could have been an option, Phil, for the ongoing conversation about our silly robot Punchy Punch. But they're not Skitarii. So.
But do they have the data tether keyword, which is also...
Well, you would imagine they might. Because they,
a lot of things do. So some of the vehicles, like the Scorpus Disintegrator, has the data tether keyword. Castellan robots do not have it.
There we go.
The Dragoons and the Chickens have data tether. Petraxi do not have it.
All right. Phil, I reckon in the name of wrapping all this stuff up, let's do relics. Let's do 2 relics each, and then let's talk about units we like, although it's relatively evident which units we like because we spoke about them throughout the process. But let's do 2 relics each, and then, take it home.
I know which one I'm going for, because it is...
Well, please, take it away.
It is the Exemplar's Eternity. It is a Skitarii Martial model only. The bearer's Servo Skull uplink ability is replaced with the following. While a friendly Forge World Skitarii core unit is within 6 inches of that model, each time a model in that unit makes an attack roll, reroll the hit roll of 1 and a wound roll of 1. And then just for context in terms of what that martial ability normally is, let me just quickly turn the pages, everyone. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm so sorry, it's taking a while. Right. It has the ability, while a friendly Skitarii core unit within 6 inches, each time a model makes an attack roll, reroll the wound roll of 1. So it's normally like a lieutenant, but now becomes chapter master. Or was it captain? Or was it both? No, a lieutenant and a captain.
That's a lieutenant and a captain,
lieutenant
all in one.
Captain.
Or an Imperial Fist captain with the Eye of Hypnoth, or whatever it's called. I think that's the thing that gives them the lieutenant buff as well. Whatever it is one of them. Yeah, that's good. It's not bad. I'm going to go with the skull of Elder Nicola.
I'm glad you went for that one.
I am. Well, because it's a skull in it, and if it's a skull, it needs to be talked about. At the start of the shooting phase, roll 1d6 for each enemy vehicle unit within 12 of the bearer. On a 2 to 3, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 4 to 5, that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds, and on 6, it suffers 3 mortal wounds. So yeah, nice. Again, kind of gets across the point that they're quite good at taking vehicles apart. So if you get close to them, they'll tinker with you. And
there is a Forge World relic that does something very similar to this, which is one we got glossed over. But yeah, the fact that this does it as well is pretty cool.
What you got for your next one, Phil?
Are we doing another one? Oh, I didn't realize.
We did two each, mate.
Sorry.
2 each.
I wasn't listening.
It's all right, mate. I understand. It's getting late.
Let's see. Let's go for the Tempocoria. At the start of a fight phase, you can select 1 enemy unit within 3 inches of the bearer, so you've got to be quite up close with him. That unit is not eligible to fight this phase until all other eligible units in the army have done so. And I do believe that actually it doesn't work like that anymore because of the way they've done the FAQ. It basically just means they fight last.
Very nice. Very nice. And the last one I'll go with is the Cage of Varadidamimas. And, you know, because it's a cage, right? It doesn't like, you know, being caged up. Each time the bearer hits an enemy unit, excluding vehicles, with a melee attack until the end of the phase, that unit is electro-shocked. Each time a model in an electro-shock unit makes an attack, subtract 1 from the attack's hit rolls. So there you go. You basically cover them in electricity, and then they're having a rough old time trying to do what they want, which is fun.
That's not bad.
All right, Phil. Now,
are we going to gloss over the chapter approved rules?
Yeah, again, I feel like chapter approved rules are pretty self-explanatory to anyone who is going to be using this army themselves. They can make their own judgments on that. I think, basically, Phil, I'm crazy conscious of the amount of questions we got from the community, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to address those appropriately.
Was any of them about the Crusade rules? Do you not want to talk about them?
No, I don't want to talk about
them. They're so good.
But no one knows anything about it.
I glanced at them and they're cool. I'll just quickly say one thing. Like, when you go around doing your missions, you basically can collect archaeotech. And then once you've collected enough of certain bits, you can make your own weapons and stuff. Isn't that cool?
That is exciting. So I can collect enough screwdrivers to make a real big screwdriver.
That's a gun. Yes.
That's a gun. There we go. I never knew that was possible. I need to collect clearly more screwdrivers. So look, I mean, in terms of the units, it's interesting, right? Because obviously once upon a time, as those of us who remember these things will tell you, Skitarii were one thing, Cult Mechanicus was another. What's happened since then is Games Workshop have released a bucket load of new Skitarii models, but kind of forgot about the fact that they were doing a separate Cult Mechanicus series of things, and then kind of merged it all together. So now you have loads of different Skitarii stuff and not that much Cult Mechanicus stuff. But in terms of the units that are in here, there are definitely some interesting elements. Obviously, it will go, without us saying that we are still big fans of the Castellan robots, although you do need that data smith to really unlock their silly potential. The Iron Striders and the Dragoons we've kind of waxed lyrical about, as well as the Sterilizers and Skystalkers. So it feels like at this point we probably don't need to drastically elaborate on those. The one that I will talk about is the Rust Stalkers, because the Rust Stalkers are a rather crazy combat unit. So we haven't talked about it yet. So they are movement 8, which is very strong. Weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 3, strength 4, toughness 3, 2 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 6, which is terrible, and a 4+ save. Now, out of the box, they are armed with a Chawed Claw and Transonic Razor. But what you're going to probably look to do is change out for the Transonic Blades, because each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 1 mortal wound on the target in addition to any normal damage, which actually, as it turns out, is the same as the Transonic Razor. Hang on, let me just double check war gear options here. Any number of Sakaran Rustalkers can each have their Chawed Claw and Transonic Razor replaced with 1 Transonic Blade. Okay. Oh, I see. So it was Chawed Sword.
So yeah, Chawed Claw basically strength user -1 damage, but you get 1 additional attack each time you fight, and the option of the Transonic Razor, which is strength user -2 1 damage, but you can inflict mortal wounds on 6. So you get the option of those two, or you just take the Transonic Blades, which is definitely what you would do because it's +1 strength, -3, so an increase of 1 AP and 1 damage, but you still got that same ability of wound rolls of 6 do mortal wounds.
Yeah, and these units ignore all modifiers to movement, and in the new FAQs, they've updated how dense cover works as well. So this now actually means that they ignore the dense cover movement debuffs also, because there was a weird stipulation around that most of the Death Guard players got really annoyed at, because they had an ability that did the same thing, but with the way the rules worked, it didn't work weirdly. But now it does, so that's cool. They've all got 5-up invulnerable saves, and each time a range attack is allocated to models in this unit while it is receiving the benefits of cover, add an additional 1 to the armor save, so they get 2-up armor saves when they're in cover, which is pretty decent. The thing that's
I was going to say one thing you missed with the movement is they still suffer the effects of the deprecation effect with the the non-canticles, the Doctrina imperatives. So when there's the minus movement, they still suffer from that, and they also don't have any modifiers to. They ignore the modifiers to advanced rolls and charge rolls as well, not just a regular move. So that's really strong,
very strong. And the thing about them that is crazy is the fact that they are doing mortal wounds in addition to everything else, and there's no cap on this, right? So a unit of 10 of these guys. And to be fair, you might really strongly consider taking 10 of these guys because you can easily put them inside of the Scorpius June Rider, the transport option for them. And then you are basically going along with 31 attacks. And obviously, any 6s that you roll for wounds will then become mortal wounds in addition to your regular damage. So you're just going to do an absolute truckload of damage to things. Like 10 of these guys running into 30 Orc boys are just going to clean house. But even when you're going into more elite units, like 5 Deathwing Terminators, for example, you're still going to do a lot more wounds on top of everything else. And everything from Death Guard to Deathwing to anything don't like mortal wounds. So, yeah, very strong unit, in my opinion, Phil. Very, very strong.
Yeah, it seems really good. Likewise, the Skitaran Infiltrators seem like a pretty good choice. I believe it's a similar stat line, but minus 1 attack. They're Flechette Blasters, as we talked about, range 12, pistol 5, strength 3, AP 0, 1 damage. They come with the Stub Carbine and Power Swords, but obviously you can swap out the Stub Carbine Power Sword for the Flechette Blaster and a Taser Goad. People know what Power Sword is, I won't read that one out. Taser Goad, +2 strength, -1 damage. And each time an unmodified hit roll of a 6 scores 2 additional hits. That's pretty tasty. And then for their abilities, they get a 5-up invuln save. Each time an attack is made against this unit, if the attacking model is within 12 inches, hit rolls cannot be rerolled and wound rolls cannot be rerolled. So that's a really good counter for aura abilities. They've also got infiltrating positions, which allows them to deep strike. And then they've got voices in the code, which is an aura ability. So if an enemy unit is within 3 inches of it, you subtract 1 to their leadership roll.
Just a clarification there, Phil. They get to infiltrate. They're not deep striking. Yes?
Oh,
Yes.
during deployment you can set this up. Oh, it can be set up anyway. Okay, right. Yeah, sorry, I didn't
Yes.
actually read it. I just guessed.
The clue's in the name, Phil. It says infiltrators.
True. I just said during deployment 9 inches. Oh, it'll be deep strike. Don't worry, people.
Yeah, it'll be deep strike. That'll be what it is. No. It's the same as Phobos that isn't Reavers.
Not bad.
Which is pretty cool. One of the units that used to get loads of love once upon a time and worth talking about now is the humble Electro Priest. The Flugerite, the Flugerite Electro Priest, basically the fighty one. These guys used to be crazy. Now not so much, maybe. Let's just quickly go through it. So they're movement 6, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 4+, strength and toughness 3, 1 wound, 2 attacks, leadership 8, and a 6+ save. It is worth noting that these guys do have the core keyword, which also the infiltrators and the ruststalkers do have as well. We should have probably mentioned that because it is important. These guys don't have any options. They all come with the Electro Leech stave, which is +2 strength, making them strength 5, -2 damage. Each time an attack is made with this weapon, an unmodified wound roll of 6 inflicts 2 mortal wounds on the target, and the attack sequence ends. So yeah, you basically get to do 2 mortal wounds on the target in addition to, hang on, let me just check the wording. So what's interesting actually is it says if you just roll a 6, you just do 2 more wounds but you don't do it in addition to any normal damage.
Yeah.
So
the attack sequence ends, so you don't get to carry on with your damage step.
But because of the
you've
way
done 2
more
mortal
wounds are
wounds.
distributed.
Yeah.
You've done 2 more wounds rather than allowing them to potentially roll a save, which is all right. They've got a 5+ invulnerable save. They've got Canticles of the Omnissiah. They've got the Voltigheist Blast. After this unit finishes a charge move, select one enemy unit within engagement range of this unit. Roll a d6 for each model from this unit that is within engagement range, and on a 6, they suffer mortal wounds, or rather the enemy unit suffers mortal wounds, which is all right. Fanatical Devotion. Each time a model in this unit would lose a wound, roll a d6 on a 5+. That wound is not lost. That is very strong. 5 up, feel no pains are very strong. Except these guys only have 1 wound. So
they're like my horses, but 1 wound, because they've got
they're
a
like
5
1
up
wound horsey.
invuln save and a 5 up feel no pain. So that is strong.
And then when this unit destroys an enemy unit for the first time until the end of the battle, add 1 to the rolls made with this unit's
Voltigheist
Blast.
Voltigheist.
So Voltigheist, thank you. Which means now you're going to be doing mortal wounds on 5s, and your invuln improves to 4+, which is way worse than it used to be. But actually, in hindsight, or not in hindsight, but looking at it in the context of 9th edition, still pretty good, actually.
Interesting, because the first time I saw that, I assumed you would pick one or the other to add rolls to your Voltigheist ability or get your invuln save, but it's actually both, which is well good.
Yes, I mean, actually, see, it's weird. I just assumed that these guys didn't really have much viability left in them, but it actually sort of transpires that they're actually still pretty reasonable, you know?
Yeah, I'm just never that keen on the model. That's the thing that pisses me off about these guys. They look nice in the codex because they're really well painted, but normally they're just, they're a bit weird.
They definitely are a weird unit, the Electro Priest. There's some other like Mechanicus themed models, maybe like the weird guys from Blackstone Fortress or something that might represent them better, but even then I'm not super convinced. I think someone somewhere came up with a good proxy for them based on the 40k range, but I can't remember what it was now. But there are some options out there, but actually better than I thought they were. Actually, credit where credit's due. Phil, do you want to pick one more unit before we move on and see the community questions, or should we do 2 more?
There's a couple I want to talk about.
Well, then let's talk about them.
One of them, Skitari Marshall. I think we should go back to him and finish him off.
Definitely have to talk about the Marshall.
The new shiny model comes with an excellent servo skull. I covet it very greatly. If you don't want it on your one, pass it my way, Dan.
I mean, I would like it on my one, but I guarantee I've used it.
It's not what you said last time we spoke.
Well, what I was going to finish the statement of, I would like it on my one, but after I've played maybe 4 games with it, it will have fallen off. So I may as well just embrace the inevitable and remove it from the outset. That's kind of my mindset with this stuff. So yeah, you can have it, Phil. It's fine.
Correct answer. Thank you very much.
No worries.
So this guy, movement 6, weapon skill 3+, ballistic skill 2+, strength toughness 3, 4 wounds, 3 attacks, leadership 8, 4+ save. He's got the Radium Serpenta, which is range 18, assault 1, strength 3, AP 0, 1 damage. Each time an attack is made with this weapon against an enemy unit, excluding vehicles, an unmodified hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds it. He also has the control stave. It's a close combat weapon, +3, so strength 6, -2, 1 damage. He's got the Servo Skull Uplink Aura ability, which we talked about earlier. So that's the Skitarii Core Aura ability. Skitarii Core units within 6 inches may reroll wound rolls of 1. He's got a 5+ invuln save, and he's also got Control Edict, which is in your command phase. You can select 1 friendly Skitarii unit within 9 inches, or you can select 1 friendly Forge World Skitarii Data Tether unit. Again, lots of those units that we talked about have data tether. Until the start of your next command phase, that unit ignores the deprecation effect of the currently active Doctrina Imperative, which I think is quite important because those are really good, but the negatives can be really bad. So if you stick this guy next to something you want to ignore, I think that's he's worth it just for that, basically.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if you're looking at these guys, you probably want to be looking at that relic that Phil was talking about that allows you to reroll hit, reroll wound. I think that's important for him. And it's not unimportant to state the fact that he's only 45 points. So he's a cheap HQ, which, is often very valuable. The second cheapest HQ is tied between the Tech Archaeologist and the Tech Priest Engineer, which are both 55 points.
Can we just talk about the Techno Archaeologist? We don't need to talk about his rules, but can we just say he is the old Blackstone Fortress Daedalus model? And
are you going to show off about the fact that you managed to get a combat patrol now? Is that what you're about to tell me?
No, my point was that outside of combat patrol, which you can only get in America and Germany, you can't buy this model anywhere.
But Phil, you don't live in America or Germany, and yet you've got a combat arena. We kept calling it combat patrol there, but it's combat arena.
Combat arena.
How did you do this, Phil? Wait,
I found a nice chap in Germany who's willing to buy it and then post it to me, and then I gave him lots of money for it. So it can be done. I would not advise it. It makes me wonder if this model is actually going to come out at some point. What's interesting, so that sprue from Combat Arena is all one sprue, comes with all the other characters like the Crusader and the Rogue Trader, for example. So will they sell that as a sprue down the line? Will they somehow split it out onto individual sprues, which isn't something they normally do, but you never know. It's odd that they've included it, but you can't actually get hold of this model. And it makes me wonder.
Well, you can if you're in America or Germany, which a great deal of GW's customers are.
I guess, but no, right. They normally only put models in a codex that they sell. And normally when they sell something...
They do sell it in America.
Right, but normally when they sell something, they sell it worldwide and it's on the Games Workshop web store. But I don't know. It's...
Yeah, this is for sale in America, which is probably one of their biggest, if not their biggest market. Therefore, whatever.
But if you're in the UK, you're stuck, basically.
Yeah, but, we get everything. We get the cheaper prices, don't we? Ooh, exciting, all that good stuff. Or whatever. It's just, look, I get it. It's relatively easy to do a bit of kit bashing to get one of these things put together, but not super easy, but there are options. There are ways around it. But I like the fact they've added it. They've also added the Tech Priest Manipulus, which was a kill team model. I think that's been released separately, hasn't it? The Manipulus?
He came out quite a while ago.
They did actually get around to releasing that one separately. But yeah, look, overall, I like the Skitarii. I like the Con Mechanicus. I like the whole thing. I think we may as well just get in a closing statement, Phil, because we need to move on to community questions. And
there's two more things I just want to say really quickly.
Please, you can say it in your summary, Phil. Go on, you go first.
Okay. Well, one of the poor and lonely models units is the poor humble servitors, which don't ever seem to get any love. They're obviously the only model within this entire book that is fine cast or metal.
Unless, of course, you've got combat arena, eh, Phil?
And in which case you get one, not even enough to make a squad of 4, unless you buy it 4 times if you're mad. But what's odd is the servitors always just seem a bit rubbish. They never seem to be very good. They never seem to do anything, or they don't seem to have any inclination to make them playable. And I think they can do actions. I seem to recall somewhere hearing that they couldn't, but I can't seem to find anything that they say they can't. They don't have core, but it seems like they can do action, so maybe there'd be a cheap unit for that potentially.
So Mindlock was the unit within 6 of friendly Forge World tech priest units. Models in that unit have the weapon skill, ballistic skill 4, and leadership characteristic 9. In addition, if your army is Battleforge, then each Forge World tech priest units, including in a detachment, 1 Forge World servitor unit can be included without taking up a battlefield role. Yeah, there's nothing in it that says they can't do it.
They don't get canticles, but they
do get canticles.
No, they don't, because that was explicitly removed from them for being servitors.
But it says in their abilities, canticles of the Omnissiah. It's the very first thing.
Right, okay. Hold on. Let's just quickly flip to the
So they
front.
have it, but they don't have it.
Right, I'm pretty sure.
Well, it's a good thing you brought this up, Phil. Look at this. Quality content here.
Right, so Forge World Dogmas. Dogmas they don't get. All Adeptus Mechanicus units other than servitor units with this ability and all models in them gain a dogma. Right, so they get canticles, but don't get the dogma. Weird, but okay.
Yeah.
But other servitors like the breaches and stuff, they get it. Okay, right. It's
one of those things, though, isn't it? It's a shame that they haven't taken the time. Even like this to me is where Forge World should be stepping in and creating a more kind of diversity and range within this part of 40k. To me, like that's where they can add a difference, because all of a sudden, if they gave us 5 awesome servitor sculpts, you're going to be like, yeah, I'll buy some of those, because then you can start to express the grim dark aspect of this army, you know. And I like that. I like the idea of, in a fluff sense, chucking loads of servitors into my army for no other reason than it adds flavor and expresses the kind of grim dark aspect of it.
Yeah,
but I suppose by that extent you can convert to achieve the same outcome, right? Because a servitor doesn't just need to look like what the servitors look like in the model range. I mean, these things are cobbled together from all sorts of miscellaneous parts. So you can have a servitor that's maybe externally looks like it's entirely human, but potentially could be advancedly cybernetic, but still completely lobotomized and subservient. I mean, again, it is limitless in some regards.
It's definitely something I've been wanting to explore more. I'm going to plug this hashtag that I've been doing on Instagram called hashtag Codex Surf, which is for all of these little things like servitors, cherubs, servo skulls, your serfs, your people carrying your books and your weapons. I definitely want to make it a thing. I want to add it to my army, even if they're like things like wound counters or just decorative elements for your army. But I think it just adds a visual element to it. So I'd encourage everyone to have a go, kit bashing them, or just giving some servitors some love.
I mean, that sounded very terrifying as a closing statement, in the sense that you would like people to create and use them on the tabletop.
Do it. I command you.
Well, good, Phil.
Yes,
I'm glad that didn't take a creepy undertone.
No, I know. Otherwise, closing statements. Yeah, it's a solid book. Oh, I'm going to say one more thing before I do my final closing statement.
Please.
For one model, I'm sorry, Dan. I'm so sorry.
It's all right, mate. It's all right.
The one model I would like them to do, and it's a bit of a Black Library thing, is for Belisarius Call. I think we should have Alpha Primus. You're just going to go, I don't know who he is.
I don't know who Alpha Primus is.
In all the stories of Black Library, whenever you see Belisarius Call, you get Alpha Primus. He's the first, not first Primarch, he's the first Primaris Marine that he created. He acts as his bodyguard. He's very grumpy and disgruntled, and he actually doesn't really like Belisarius Call very much. I think he resents him. But he's also a psyker as well. So I like the idea that he could act as a bodyguard. He should have his own data sheet. He's got psychic powers. He obviously does, I don't know, some kind of lookout sir ability for Belisarius cool. I think he should be in here, but I imagine if they ever did it, it would be one of those Black Library special edition miniatures that they would do. And yes, I know it's a Space Marine, but I love it. It's again Codex Surf. It's like one Space Marine in your Adeptus Mechanicus army. I think that'd be fantastic.
They should make his servitor from when he was early doors, Horus Heresy. They should make Tesla. There you go. There's a reference for you. Tesla was his servitor that he made himself when he was an up-and-coming, tech priest or whatever. In the early years of the heresy, when he wasn't Belisarius cool of today. Anyway, there you go. Phil, final thoughts, mate. What are you going to say?
It's a really solid book. There's bits we haven't touched on, like, there's some weird things like the Archaeothopter can transport a squad between two flyers because it doesn't have
that was a stratagem we should have talked about, really. Yeah, so you can take two transport planes, put one unit in both of them, and then deploy them simultaneously, which is pretty mad.
And that's an inbuilt ability to it because it only has...
it's not even a stratagem, is it?
Yeah, it only has an inbuilt transport capacity of 6. So pretty much for anything that has a transport capacity of 10, you can split it up. It makes the abilities on that thing super huge. There's also chaff launchers, subtract -1 from your damage roll, which combines, I think, with, what was it, Lucius, where if you've only got damage 1, you get +1 to your save. So technically, you could potentially be hit by a damage 2 weapon, but then with your chaff launchers, you're making it -1. And then because it's only 1 damage now, you get +1 to your save. So there's some...
Well, I don't know if you would, because technically you'd make it 1 damage after the point that is gone through.
Well, I disagree.
You reduce the damage by 1, but that doesn't mean
each time the attack is allocated to the bearer, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic, and then you got to make me find it, aren't you?
I'm not making you find it. I'm not the one trying to be this gamey. Listen to you.
Right, hold on.
Do you want my final thoughts, Phil, while you do this? Noting that I'm conscious of the fact that we've only got about 20 minutes of recording time left to do, and I want to get to the fan questions, Phil. I don't want to rob them again after they've all so lovingly contributed to our various questionariums.
Right. Each time an attack with a damage characteristic of 1 is allocated to a model with this dogma, add 1 to any armor saving throw made for that attack. Sort of sounds like they happen at exactly the same time. Well, it depends on the order of operations, potentially. But that is it. Ultimately, is a good book, a bit complicated in places, and I hope we've kind of, made it clear what those complications are. But ultimately, it seems really good. Lots of abilities, lots of stratagems, tons of units that does everything. Like, it's not like, they don't have a psychic phase, but that's it.
Indeed. So for me, one of the things that's super exciting about the Mechanicus is that though obviously Sisters of Battle are really now technically one of the newest factions in the game, they've been there for a long time. Imperial Knights are also actually a new faction as well, right? So we can't actually discount them from this conversation. People always say like, no. They're younger than Skitarii and Admech, or they came after Skitarii and Admech.
Yes, but Sisters are like super new.
Similar. Yeah, Sisters are super new in the context of the fact that they've had new sculpts and things, but they've been there since 2nd edition, technically. Not technically, they have been. Anyway, look, long story short, Mechanicus was one of these things that, 8, 7, whatever it was years ago, didn't exist. And when it first came around, it was a really weird series of models. And over the last 5 years, they have defined and refined this range into something really iconically 40k. And it's had a few missteps. It's had a few interesting additions. There's been models that when they first came along, people weren't overly sure about, but they've all become really iconic attributes of the overall 40k aesthetic. And I think it's great. And I think this book realizes their potential. Admech now feel like a fully realized army with a kind of cohesive theme and identity that is truly their own. And I think this book is a treasure trove of tactical nuance and creative genius. I think it is a fantastic illustration of what can be done. I know people were worried about the power creep coming in with these new codexes, and I can't pretend that there isn't some strong options in here, but I think that's where the fun's at, right? If all of the armies were super bland and did everything the same, the game wouldn't be as entertaining. The fact that we can talk about things in this book that really excite us and are doing things that we've never even thought about being able to achieve with anything else is how Games Workshop stay in business and continue to shift models, but it's also how we as gamers become infused and excited. And that's how I feel with this book. I've been looking at building and expanding my range of Scutari off the back of, or my range of Mechanicus off the back of, reading and reviewing this book. I love it. I think it's great. And again, sure, it's got some power issues, but great. Everything's going to go that way from here on in anyway. So what can you do? That's just the game, right? Like, they're always going to get better. And good thing too, because, got to keep the wheels of capitalism turning.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely feels like there's lots of strong stuff, but there's nothing beyond maybe like one or two things that you pointed out where you go, this is clearly broken and needs an FAQ. Whereas the Drakari Codex, there was at least 3 or 4 things that you were like, this doesn't work how we think it's intended, and actually have since been FAQ'd very recently. Whereas it feels like the Mechanicus Codex doesn't really have that problem. Maybe
as far as we're aware.
No, that's true. There's loads of hidden combos that might turn up to be a bit egregious.
I mean, that was the benefit of when we did the Drakari review. We had Paulie Skyserpent here telling us all the broken stuff that he'd found or collectively found in the community. We haven't been that thorough, or we haven't got that same level of investment in this army, so I'm not entirely sure of everything that's out there. There's probably some stuff in it. Lots of people are annoyed with it because of the fact that it is seemingly very strong, but this is always how it goes. Strong stuff enters the meta, things shift and alternate and change, and then eventually we end up in something resembling balance because people work out what is and isn't good about this stuff, and obviously the points adjustments are more appropriate and things change in a more correcting fashion. So yeah, look, I think, whatever the case, I think it's just a really creative, interesting range, and I love it. I think it's just, well done, Games Workshop. I think it's a very, very interesting range and a really exciting set of rules, and yeah, I think, good on them. I like it, I'm sure it's going to win a lot of games and be a real nuisance for a while, but, we've only got 2 weeks or so till Sisters come out, and then before you know it, they're going to be yesterday's news, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There's a trend here with month edition codexes.
Well, all 40k codexes since its conception. Today's top tier meta is tomorrow's fish and chip paper, as they say. True. Although if you're using 40k codexes as fish and chip paper, you must be in some very, very expensive fish and chip restaurant. With a very specific niche. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's us talking about that. We're going to move on to the end of the show where we're going to try and answer as many community questions as we can in the time afforded to us, which isn't much, but we'll do the best we can. Transitional noise. Woo! All right, then, Phil, it's the end of the show, and we're going to try and answer our community questions on the topic of AdMech, noting that because of the way that we record this podcast to give you this smooth, buttery audio quality that you've come to expect, we have limits to our bandwidth and what we are able to do. So we now actually only have 21 minutes of time remaining in order to record for this cycle. And then, actually, frustratingly, tomorrow it's going to reset entirely. But for right now, I've now probably only got 20 minutes and 30 seconds where me and Phil are going to try and answer as many community questions as you were gracious enough to give us. So, Phil, let's get on with it, eh?
Starting off with our buddy, Fingers_RFW, that guy we played online recently with the Rapid Fire Wargaming guys. He has an AdMech army, so he's invested in this. He says, our Sicarian infiltrators still worth a look. I used to drop 10 down with the Wrath of Mars, 50 shots with reroll 1s to hit due to canticles. Dropping in the backfield used to surprise a few people.
So you're not going to be rerolling 1s anymore with canticles.
Correct.
But obviously, in this example, they're going to be Mars. So you are going to be using your Scutari ability to hit on 2s. And then you're going to be using one of the various canticles to bolster some of the other attributes. I think there's the Was there one
Well,
that
you wouldn't
ignored
be
like
using tentacles unless you're Mars.
which he will
but
be because he's Wrath of Marsingham.
Yes, in which case you can get yourselves +1s to hit with your ballistic skill.
Yeah. But what would would that be the Canticle ability? The
No,
Canticle
that would be
ability.
the Doctrina Imperatives gives you a +1 ballistic skill, -1 weapon
Correct.
skill.
Yeah. And
So
then
yeah,
is there any Canticles that would have benefited that?
you can
I can't
do
remember now.
roll, 1 hit roll, wound roll, 1 damage roll. It's not super great for it. Yeah, the Skitarii stuff, a bit like the Warlord traits, seem to be just better overall, I think, for the Skitarii stuff versus the Mechanicus stuff.
Yeah, indeed. I think, yeah. I mean, maybe if you're going to chuck them in afterwards for some combat purposes, maybe you can do the roll 3d6 for your charge, discard the lowest, or maybe you could add 1 to the strength of your melee attacks. Would be a decent option to combo up with that. But anyway, regardless, yeah, we agree with Phil. Phil being the real life name of that individual. Yeah, we agree that there is options there. But again, you could consider other Skitarii units to achieve the same outcome, such as the fly guys that, again, with that CP nonsense, can jump back and forth, which would be extra frustrating, which means more fun, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Moving on, Cantor Blue. He says, do you think Admech are actually mega powerful, or do you think it's just another knee-jerk reaction to a new codex? Every book that's released, there are claims that the world is falling, and I think it's just the way 9th edition codexes are designed. He's hoping for super powerful orcs and Chaos Space Marines. Ha ha ha. Because those are the ones he collects. You're correct, it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, but yes, they are all powerful, and way more so than the 8th edition ones. And Chapter Approved hasn't really fixed that. Thanks, Games Workshop. That's my answer.
Yeah, and I can really only echo that sentiment. I think it's a knee-jerk reaction. I think people have gotten understandably concerned by the headlines of, oh, this does this and this does that, and obviously you got a lot of people as well who've gone out of their way to power creep into Drukhari, who are now getting frustrated because there is one army that these guys are very, very good at doing over, and it's Drukhari. So that's the thing. It's like, oh, my Drukhari army was supposed to be super, super top tier, but it isn't really anymore because Admech. And I think that's where it becomes interesting, right? Is that ultimately, if you're chasing the meta constantly, you're going to come up against these problems. I think Skitarii will definitely enjoy a strong place in people's competitive scenes for a while yet. But I do think that once the Sisters and the Orc book comes along, it's going to change things up massively, especially with the way the Beast Snaggers are looking. Already, I can see that with the Beast Snaggers being high toughness, low wounds, and heavy, a large amount of bodies, it's going to completely shift things. Like when that Orc book comes out, I genuinely believe that they are going to resurrect the Horde meta and really bring some interesting new nuances into the game that we haven't seen or aren't seeing at the moment with the way that 8th edition handled armies like the Orcs. So, yeah, I think Orcs are going to be strong. I don't think you're going to see Chaos Space Marines for ages, although I love it if you did, because obviously Thousand Suns hopefully are only around the corner. But yeah, Orcs. So, yeah, I just think it's knee-jerk reactions. I think people just get a bit... The internet does that, right? That's how it goes.
For sure.
At least in wargaming.
Indeed. Next one, going on as quick as possible. Warhammer Hobbyist. He just makes a statement. So heavy support like the Scorpus disintegrators took a hit with its reduction to strength. Yeah, looking at that unit, I'm not a fan of it in terms of how it looks, and it just fills a very similar role to the Dunecrawler. So it's quite good at sort of more elite infantry, anti-marine meta, because it's got lots of 2 damage stuff and its mortars can shoot out of line of sight. But ultimately, that kind of heavy hitter anti-tank vehicle, I much prefer the Dunecrawler. It's iconic. It looks so good. Yeah,
the Dunecrawler is gorgeous. I think it's one of the models where Games Workshop absolutely nailed it. It's near perfect within this range. Yeah, I agree. The strength reductions are frustrating, but not when you consider how egregious it was before. I felt like it was too strong before. It needed some balance, and that's what they've given it, and appropriately so. It feels right to be where it's at the minute. I think more than that was a bit too much. I mean, I have played plenty of those things shooting through walls, causing me nothing but headaches. So seeing it having a slight strength reduction is a lovely thing. Next one, Phil. Or are you frantically checking something there?
No, I'm good. I was quickly having a look for the next question in terms of the answer for it. So hairless, hairless underscore painting is a big one. Just seen in Backrap where Skitarii Vanguard squad auto wounded units on a 4+ to hit with ranged weapons and did additional damage and additional AP. Is this just a strat, or does it need a few things like character buffs, doctrina, and strats? And are there any number of these go-to attack synergies? So, from what I've seen, the only times you can auto wound is on a 6+. Unless,
wow.
But as we said, we haven't looked for all the stratagems unless you found it already.
Well, no, it's arc rifles themselves, right? So arc rifles are rapid fire 1. Sorry, yeah. So so the arc rifle is rapid fire 1. Let me just check the options on these guys. So every 10 models in your Skitarii Vanguard Railgun carbines can be replaced with 1 for every 10 models. So you can take 1 arc rifle. You can't take loads, but arc rifles, unmodified wound rolls of 4 successfully wounds a target. So each time an attack is made with this weapon against a vehicle, that attack has a damage characteristic of 3, and an unmodified wound roll of 4 successfully wounds the target. So there's 1 arc rifle in every 10 models.
I found a stratagem called Enriched Rounds, 1 CP, use it in your shooting phase. Until the end of that phase, when you make an attack with a radium weapon, an unmodified hit roll of 4+ automatically wounds the target.
Yeah, so radium carbines are range 18, assault 3, and any unmodified hit rolls of 6 automatically wound the target, but you're increasing that to 4+, yeah. So, yes, it's entirely plausible. And very, very strong, to be fair.
Yeah, how you get the extra damage and AP, I'm not sure, but let's assume
the extra damage, the extra AP is coming from, which flipping doctrine was it now for the extra AP?
Oh, right, yeah. There's, as you said, yeah, there's doctrine, dogma. That,
so it's the half rate. It's the half range one, right? Gives them the extra AP, takes them from AP- to AP1, which was, I'm trying to find the flipping name of it now. Was it? So it was Argapine. Each time a model with this dogma makes a range attack, targets the unit at half range. The armor penetration and characteristic improved by 1. The damage I don't know about. Maybe the damage is coming from a mistake, or maybe it's come from something else. I don't know what's doing the damage, but yeah. So far, we have found 2 out of the 3 components that this individual has referenced. Phil is looking intently. He will not allow himself to be defeated by this.
Well, I was just looking under the Holy Orders, which are your upgrades, to see if there was anything there, and it doesn't. I think it doesn't seem like there is. No. So if there's anything, it's going to be a stratagem, I think.
Well, there we go. So yes, I mean, did they have any opinions on that, or was it just more of a I saw this?
Were there any go-to attack synergies?
Were there any go-to attack? What? Sorry, Phil, you broke up
attack
there for me.
Attack synergies.
I think we kind of covered all of what we feel is strong in that regard, right? Like, I think we've kind of covered our bases in terms of that throughout the content of the show, and that's just chuck Castellan robots at people, right?
There are others, but that was our favourite. Not necessarily. I mean, it seems good, but it also seems a lot of fun.
Well, I think, not just that though, as well, right? We talked about the Wrath of Mars synergies. We talked about the whole moving in and flying away thing with the bird units. We talked about using dive bombing, auto exploding planes with bombs attached to them. There's lots of really cool, interesting ways that you can express your kind of creative killing potential in a game of 40k with these guys. Rough Stalkers doing more wounds. There's loads of stuff.
Yeah, and we didn't really touched on it, but one of the big changes was changing the Skitarii, Vanguard, and Rangers from squads of 10 to up to 20. And obviously, if you're then doing stratagems or even getting an aura to reroll ones or reroll ones to hit and wound, for example, benefiting 20 guys instead of 10 guys is a huge buff. So there's lots of things where you can double up by taking these big squads, which is good for things like other people that are taking blast weapons. So it's nice little counters for things like that.
Totally agree. What we got next, Phil?
Pasta_Levac says, maybe I'm getting old, but finding 9th edition confusing in terms of codex layout of all the factions. So to hear AdMech 1 is particularly confusing fills me with binary dread.
What do you reckon, Phil?
It is confusing to an extent, and the layout doesn't help the book because, for example, your canticles and your doctrina imperatives should really be at the front. I think once you get your head around it, from what we've read through yesterday, we kind of got our head around the main gist of it. But there's so many more deep levels to it where you got your data tether keyword and your core keyword are very specific to certain units, and a lot of abilities and stratagems revolve around those two things. So knowing which units have those keywords is quite important. Having an army split between Mechanicus and Skitarii, and in each turn you've got to select a different thing for both. That's something to also bear in mind. And things like Castellan robots, where you've got to set their protocols a turn in advance. It's like when you're playing it, I think there's a lot of like mental sort of brain power and thinking that you've got to do, and also just to remember all of that stuff. So I think the codex maybe isn't as bad as people think it is, but I think when you play it, especially if you're taking a large army with lots of different units with lots of different abilities, then you've got a lot to remember. But if you're just playing a casual game, you don't need to play with all of these rules if you don't want to. Just start with the basics, forget about dogmas or canticles, just play some games, and as you progress you'll learn and pick them up, and the sort of muscle memory of playing the games over and over, you'll pick it up eventually.
Yeah, I think 9th edition is really frustrating for a lot of people. I remember I can't remember, sorry, if I talked about this on a previous episode, but I recently got together with some friends who haven't been playing 40k since 7th edition. And I was essentially helping them learn 9th edition. And the amount of instances where they were completely bamboozled as players who have a broad understanding of the construct of the game. These guys are, huge board gamers, have played all sorts of tabletop war games. I used to play tabletop war games with these guys back, when we were at university together, right? So these guys have got a long history of playing these sorts of games. They haven't played 9th edition, and they found it absolutely bewildering to understand all the stratagems, the synergies between how all the different keywords, and auras factor into each other. And then once you add in the secondaries and every other element that is in play, it's very complicated. And AdMech exemplify that. As Phil has said, in the command phase, you need to remember to go, right, for my Skitarii leader matey boy, I need to pick that unit and they won't suffer the negative. I also need to pick what my Skitarii thing is. Then I need to pick what my canticles is. Then I need to remember what thing that unit of robots is becoming. Then I need to remember what secondary I'm trying to achieve. Then I need to remember what aura I'm giving to things. Then my warlord trait needs to go on this unit to then give them, can only be wounded on 4s. It's so intensive. I don't know what the data cards are like for the Adeptus Mechanicus. I wasn't able to get any, but I have ordered some alongside my copy of Chapter Approved 2021. So I hope that that's got some actually meaningful tokens in it that will enable me, because those kind of gaming aids are hugely vital for this kind of army. You need something to visualize, and you also need to really, as Phil has said, go through the steps and become familiar, because it's so important with this army. There's a lot to remember.
Yeah, and to highlight that, 2-Bit Paint sort of follows up with a very pertinent comment. He says, it feels overly complex and a bit clunky, and this is something that we missed. Things like the Datasmith's action to change the robot protocols makes them lose core, because the core is an aura ability, and that gets turned off when you do an action. He then says, it could be a design intention to make you take more than one Datasmith, but the type of thing is an easy rule to miss and forget, because we completely forgot it. Same with switching between the Tech Priest upgrades. The internal balance seems way off between the sub-factions, given that Cataphrons are not core Mechanicus, which is a bit of a shame, which is a huge issue, especially if you want to take just Mechanicus as a whole. And not the Skitarii. He says it's a huge issue as either Cult Mechanicus army and the HQs have almost no interaction with my line troops, which is what they are. It really does feel like a Codex Skitarii, all of which looks very strong. What do you think of Cool? I'm not sure he's worth taking even for a Mars list. He says, my pick is Forge World Lucius. Deep striking transhuman Electro Priest bombs looks fun. So he's picked up on that strategy, but he says Electro Priests, we say Castellan robots. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, in terms of Belisarius Cool, I think, I mean, he's basically a bigger, he's somewhere between a Primarch and a Chapter Master, but Adeptus Mechanicus, right? So in terms of his abilities, he gives the Chapter Master style reroll, and apologies to those who don't necessarily understand what that means, but I assume in some part that Space Marine terminology is relatively standard, but he basically allows a core unit to reroll all misses. He has the aura to allow to reroll ones. He's got a 5-up invuln save, but if he's your warlord, he actually has a 4-up invuln save and -1 damage. He's the master of machines, which is the same as any tech priest, and he has a self-repair mechanism, which none of the other guys have as well. His weapons are all right. I mean, here's the thing. I don't think he's worth it in the sense that he is actually quite expensive, and I don't think with the way the army plays now that you're going to hugely see the benefit of him overall. In the old days of the Dakabots, he was super valuable. These days,
he still has the ability to use a canticle that's already been active on him and someone else. So I think that's good.
Oh yeah, that as well. Yes, because he has that baked in, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Because that's the Lord of Mars thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the Lead in Prayer.
Lead in Prayer.
Lord of the Machine Cult is the reroll. Hit rolls of 1. Yeah, Lead in Prayer is select a Mechanicus core unit within 6 inches, and then select 1 canticle. And it can be one that's already been active, and it lasts for the command phase. Until the next command phase. And you don't get the one that's currently active for your army.
I just struggle with 180 points. He fit in the way this army plays, as I've already sort of said. HQs don't feel like the most important element, so a unit that is that pricey just feels like just a bad investment in this army.
Again, as 2-Bit Paints points out, like even that ability for Lead in Prayer is Cult Mechanicus core, so it just doesn't work on your Catphron breaches, it's a real shame that they've done that, because it locks them out of a lot of abilities, and it's like they're meant to be the troops for Mechanicus. And if Mechanicus was a bigger army, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, but as we've said, it's really Skitarii army with some Mechanicus stuff sprinkled in, and weirdly all the HQs bar 1 are Mechanicus. It's a bit odd.
Yeah, it is very odd, to be fair. I think, again, for me, with the way that I'm looking at this list in a minute, I will have some destroyers, not breaches, but I'll have the minimum unit allocation, because that way I'll just go, there's a patrol and it's got that 1 unit of breaches in it, and then I've fulfilled that minimum. Then the robots, then the Datasmith, and then I'm done. For that, and then the rest of it will just be Skitarii. What was the other thing? Yeah, Lucius with the Electro Priest. Yeah, love it. I mean, again, equally viable option. So yeah, totally good shout. And obviously they're core. So I guess Belisarius Cool could give them reroll hits as well, which is a thing. So there you go. Yeah.
Mhm.
What was it? Did he make any other points in that? I can't remember.
He just saying the internal balance was off. Codex Adeptus is cool, worth taking for Mars. Lucius Electro-Piece bombs with transhuman, and as you said, transhuman on the robots is maybe a bit overkill, but on these guys, well worth doing.
Yeah, true. I suppose on but that's why it's fun on the robots, because overkill is the best type.
How are we doing for
one
time?
more film? One more.
Let's do.
We have to do one more.
Right, hold on. I'm just seeing. No, there's one that talks about. Well, he talks about the lobster from a previous episode. Let's do that one. Kevin James McGill. He says, "It's me, the lobster overlord, lol, aka Sergeant McGill." I think he's the one that left us the 5-star review. I'm really liking the new book for my army. My sons are not. Can you tell me what you think is the best way to run the robots in now, with their changes not being able to shoot twice? I think we've kind of covered it in terms of go for the punchy ones, run them as Lucius, and get them in your sons' faces and make them cry.
That's the way forwards. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I think we've extensively talked about the robots and where we feel like their places in the current version. So, yeah, go with that, and yeah, I think you won't be disappointed. Especially again, not to forget that those guys have got the 15-inch range flamers as well on that build, so you can definitely, be 9 inches away from something that you're going to run into. But then you can obviously use the 15-inch flamers to start picking off shots at things that are further away as well, which is really viable and very useful. It means as well that if they do have infiltrators and they screen you out with infiltrators, you can still shoot those infiltrators if nothing else.
True. Yeah.
So there we go. All right, cool. Well, there you go, guys. Thank you so much for checking out episode 88. We're sorry if we missed some of your questions. We'll try potentially to revisit them in a future episode. It's just one of those unfortunate things. I am not, financially buoyant enough to spend yet another $5 on extending the time of this. So we're just going to have to end it there. Phil, closing thoughts, or should we just say goodbye?
I did look it up. Adeptus Mechanicum changed to Mechanicus due to basically the treaties. Mechanicum was a standalone empire, and then after Horus Heresy got folded into the Imperium of Man, changed their names because they are the loyalist counterpart of what was the Adeptus Mechanicum. So that's why they changed their name, which I think is pretty much what you said. So your guess was 100% spot on.
Hey, there you go. Right, say it with enough authority. 9 times out of 10, you're not right, but you are. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for checking out the episode. We hope you really enjoyed it. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for participating. It's always an absolute pleasure. So goodbye.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.